Most of you aren't subscribed. Make sure to subscribe, as it helps out the channel. Without further ado, beginning our series, we follow our MC Haru, promising to never forget about his childhood friend Mi, even after he moves away. As a promise, Haru promises to return and marry Mi. But as we cut to the present, we see an older-looking Haru daydreaming whilst on a bus, suddenly noticing a young girl staring at him. Out of nowhere, their bus suddenly swerves out of control, accidentally driving into a railway only to be struck and crumpled by a train. As Haru's life flashes before his eyes, he can only remember the moment when Mi agreed to marry Haru in the future. But as Haru awakens, he seems to have been transported to another world. Located in the kingdom of Beltrum, in the year 991, Haru wonders if he is Ryo or Haru. Going through his past life memories, Haru manages to easily remember his time sparring with his master, along with the moment he saw Mi flirting with another boy. But as Ryo attempts to sort out his memories whilst having a fever, he suddenly hears some men calling out to him, surprised to see that Ryo is still alive. Ignoring Ryo, the men place a precious piece of cargo, all sitting down to enjoy a meal, pleased to have earned 10 gold coins for a simple job. Starving, seeing the men eat, the men order Ryo to get lost and wash himself, forced to leave as he scrounges for some wild berries. Knowing that in his former life he was Haruto, a 20-year-old university student, Ryo reminds himself that in his new body he is a boy that needs to avenge his mother. Flashing back, Ryo faintly remembers his time with his mother, curious as to why their family has unique black hair. Upon learning that his grandparents also have black hair, Ryo asks to visit them in Yagumo one day, but before that could happen, Ryo's mother was sadly slain. Wiping away his tears, Ryo prepares to head back, but is suddenly stopped by some girls in hoods, demanding to know if Ryo has seen a purple-haired girl anywhere. Believing that Ryo is incapable of speaking, the girls prepare to leave, but Celia speaks up, asking Vanessa for permission to interact with Ryo a little longer. With a calmer tone, Celia asks for Ryo's name, impressed to see Ryo's black hair. Celia asks if Ryo could tell them where to look if they are searching for a missing person, but Ryo advises against it, especially since the ladies are wearing such nice clothing. Realizing that Ryo is right, Vanessa states that they should return with a more fitting disguise, but the two younger girls get worried they won't find Flora in time. Just in case, Vanessa asks for Celia to scan the perimeter so as to not waste time, prompting Celia to cast a large search spell, something that shocks Ryo. Surprisingly, Celia along with the girls realize that Ryo has magic flowing out of his as well, something quite rare, especially amongst orphans. Seeing as there were no other magic sources detected, the girls conclude that Flora must be up ahead, but first the girls head off needing to change. Before she forgets, Celia hands Ryo payment for the advice, shocking Ryo as Celia paid him quite a lot of silver coins. Fearing the coins will get stolen, Ryo quickly runs back home. Announcing himself as he enters the home, Ryo is caught off guard when an assassin lunges towards his heart. Having barely missed Ryo's heart, Ryo loses his pouch of coins as the pouch protects him. But Ryo also notices that all the men from earlier have been slain. As the assassin prepares to finish off Ryo, a sudden spirit appears before Ryo, offering to show Ryo how to control his magic. In a split second, the spirit advises Ryo to take the magic overflowing from his body and use it to physically enhance his body. As the spirit departs, Ryo listens to the spirit's advice, slipping a slash from the assassin, only to land a clean punch on the attacker's stomach. Surprised, the assassin casts an enhancement spell of his own, attempting to match Ryo's speed. Ryo nonchalantly flips backwards only to land a kick to that attacker's face. Now annoyed, the attacker goes rogue, swinging his blade aimlessly, but Ryo takes the chance to bind and break the attacker's knife-wielding arm. Shocked at Ryo's athletic feats, the assassin tries to grab a hold of Ryo, but Ryo simply flips the attacker over, knocking him out before Ryo can land any more blows. Assessing the situation, Ryo notices the precious cargo is squirming, choosing to open the bag only to confirm that it is indeed the purple-haired girl, Flora. In complete shock, Flora begs Ryo to take her home, offering to pay him fine if he complies. But before she can say anything further, she falls unconscious. With nothing else to do, Rio begins lugging Flora out of his village, but spots Celia and the other girls have returned with new disguises. Believing that they caught Rio red-handed, Christina slaps Rio in the face, calling the others to check on Flora. Stepping in, Vanessa asks Celia and Rona to begin healing Flora whilst they speak with Rio. But before Rio can explain the situation, Christina accuses Rio of kidnapping Flora. Seeing as Christina isn't listening, Rio attempts to grab Christina's hands. But upon realizing that Christina is being injured, Vanessa raises her blade to Rio. Defusing the situation, Vanessa states that Rio will follow them back into town, but seeing as he has no choice, Rio accepts. A few minutes later, the kingdom's men seize Rio's home, discovering that the assassin is still alive, but in the crowd, a hooded figure destroys a mysterious object, tying up any loose ends. Cutting to the royal kingdom, we see that Rio has been tied up and is now being interrogated by the vice captain of the royal guards, Charles Arbor. Charles states that if Rio cooperates, he'll promise Rio will be released, but when Charles demands Rio admit to kidnapping the princess, Rio refuses to lie. Punching Rio in the stomach, Charles insists that Rio play along, but at the same time Flora awakens caught up on everything that has transpired. Hearing that the boy that saved her is being interrogated, Flora rushes to get permission to speak with him. But as the sun begins to set, Rio is seen badly beaten, refusing to divulge any sort of information. Desperate, Charles continues to lay into Rio, but Charles's men wonder if they should stop. Charles reminds his men that they were the ones that allowed Flora to be kidnapped, so they need to redeem themselves. But at the exact moment, Celia and Vanessa appear, demanding to know what is happening. Announcing that Flora owes her life to Rio, Charles and his men have no choice but to let Rio go, cutting to later that night when Rio has been healed by Celia, learning that Celia is learning healing magic. Happy to see that Rio is alright now, Celia apologizes for all the trouble Rio's been put through, revealing that the king would like to congratulate Rio for his help today. Surprised by the sudden turn of events, Rio asks if Celia would help teach him the proper etiquette to greet the king. Cutting to the next day, when Rio has cleaned up his scruffy-looking demeanor, revealing himself as a handsome prince, as he kneels before the royal family. Several days later, Rio is seen speaking privately with Celia, telling Celia how he has yet to learn how to read and write. Understanding the situation, Celia offers to tutor Rio after school, instructing Rio to visit her in her lab under the library. As Celia guides Rio to his first class, Celia reminds Rio that the students within the school range from noble families, only to officially welcome Rio to the Beltrum Royal Academy. With Celia introducing Rio to everyone, all the students immediately gossip about how a boy from the slums had saved a member of the royal family and henceforth was allowed into their prestigious school. Flashing back, when Rio had kneeled before the royal family, the king had thanked Rio for saving his daughter, offering to sponsor Rio and grant him a scholarship to attend the Royal Academy. With Rio introducing himself, Rio is immediately mocked and laughed at, but as class starts, Rio is forced to sit at the front alone. Kicking off the class, Celia asks everyone to attempt to solve the problems she's written on the board, but as Rio attempts to work on the problems, Celia reassures Rio that he doesn't need to push himself since it's his first day. After school, Rio goes in search of Celia's lab, knocking on her door, only to spot a frantic Celia answer the door. Seeing Celia shaken up, Rio realizes Celia forgot about their private lessons, but Celia still warmly welcomes Rio into her messy-looking room. Seeing all the books scattered around, Rio wonders how old Celia is, shocked to hear that Celia is only 12 years old but has already graduated high school. Working through the afternoon, Rio impresses Celia as he solves simple multiplication and division problems, something only Princess Christina is capable of as well. Seeing as in his past life he was a university student, Rio made quick work of the simple problems, making Celia curious as to where Rio learned such a thing. Rio mentions how his deceased mother also helped teach him things, but Celia changes topics, offering Rio some tea to stop Rio from thinking about his deceased mother. Wrapping up the first day, Celia asks if Rio had any issues on the first day, but holding back his opinion on the others bullying him. Rio simply asks for book recommendations for him to learn how to read. The next day, the students are given combat lessons, but the instructor chooses to teach Rio independently, asking Rio to try landing a strike on him. Seeing Rio drop his shield and take a battle stance, the instructor gets curious, welcoming Rio's unique battle stance. Reminded of his former master, Rio charges head first, reusing attack patterns he had learned, impressing both the students and the instructor. Spotting an opening, Rio chooses to rush towards the instructor, but unfortunately the instructor barely manages to block the blow, something that impresses the students, but some still make fun of Rio. As the instructor compliments Rio for his potential as a knight, Rio shoots down the offer, choosing to head to the library instead to study. Spotting Rio alone, Celia reassures Rio that he doesn't have to try too hard, but Rio simply states that he doesn't want to waste the opportunity he's been given. On the day of the exams, Rio manages to blitz through all the exam questions, making his fellow students envious. Finishing up his exam, Rio gets flashbacks of his school life and the day he saw me with another boy. Returning to his room, Rio recounts that Hayes Maharu was once Amikawa Haruto's childhood friend, but they grew apart until one day Haruto stopped seeing me around. Seeing as he's now been given a different life, Rio states that he'll live his new life to the fullest. Cutting to the next day, where all the students are crowded around to see their scores. Shockingly, Rio and Christina have scored the highest marks for their grade, something Alphonse refuses to accept, especially since Rio is a commoner. Seeing as they heard enough, both Rana and Christina demand the Alphonse try harder next time, but when Alphonse refuses to stand down, Celia intervenes, confirming that Rio achieved his score fairly. That evening, Celia celebrates Rio achieving the highest mark for his grade, but Celia does feel bad since Rio will most likely be targeted by others moving forward. Luckily, Rio had already prepared for all of the slander and bullying, something that Celia adores in Rio, making Rio curious if Celia experienced something similar. Celia reveals that she too was bullied by others more noble than her, but it wasn't anything she couldn't handle, leading Rio to tease Celia as he states that Celia is his first ever friend. Cutting to several years later, during the year 996, the combat instructor states that the primary division for their class has been decided. First off is Alphonse, next is Stuart, and finally is Rio. When Alphonse refuses to accept a magic-less commoner as one of their knights, the instructor states that his decision is final. That evening, Celia jumps at the news of Rio being selected to participate in the upcoming tournament, mentioning how Rio might even be scouted to become a knight. As Rio helps Celia put back one of her books, Rio reminds Celia that he has no intentions of becoming a knight, but Celia is more amazed at how much Rio has grown, compared to Celia herself. Sitting down to enjoy some tea, Celia mentions how lovely the tea Rio brewed was, asking why Rio doesn't want to become a knight. Rio reveals that he has no intention of staying in the kingdom, as he plans on traveling, upsetting Celia. As a compromise, Celia offers Rio a job at the academy, sad that Rio won't be around to help Celia clean up and relieve stress. Sadly, Rio knows that him being around won't do any good for Celia, especially since Celia will have to marry someone eventually. Celia utters that she has no intentions of marrying anyone anytime soon, getting flustered when Rio mentions how cute Celia is. Seeing as Rio has made up his mind, Celia asks where Rio plans to travel, shocked by her Rio plans on visiting Yagumo, the edge of the wilderness. With the day of the tournament arriving, Alfred Emerl is tasked with refereeing the match, announcing Rio as the first challenger. With Alphonse advising Rio to not make a fool of himself, Rio steps out onto the arena, realizing that he is pitted against the royal guard, Charles Arbor. Remembering Charles as the man who tortured him, Rio and Charles exchange indirect insults, both ultimately taking their battle stances. Inspecting Rio, Charles notices Rio doesn't have a shield, choosing to go on the offense as Charles plans to punish Rio for his 5-year demotion. With Celia shocked at how serious Charles is taking the fight, Rio calmly waits for an opening, disarming Charles. When Charles refuses to accept defeat, Alfred steps in, ordering Charles to accept his defeat with dignity, ultimately crowning Rio the victor. With Alfred making note of the promising talent that is Rio, we cut to later that night where Charles is having a drink with the ambassador of the Proxia Empire. Upon hearing that he was the only one that lost to a student, Charles states he would have won if he took the battle seriously. But the ambassador is more surprised to learn that Rio was the sole survivor during Princess Flora's kidnapping 5 years ago. The next day, Celia hides waiting to celebrate Rio's victory. But upon tailing Rio, Celia discovers a girl confessing her love to Rio, feeling jealous for the first time. That night, Celia looks over her students' plans for after they graduate, surprised to see that Rio's paper is not filled, reminded that Rio plans to travel once he graduates. The next morning, Celia teaches a class of magic control, telling all her students that channeling OD into matter will cause interesting things to occur. When Celia states that their 6-year class along with the 5th years will be using lightning as the demonstration, Alphonse takes the opportunity to point out any mage should be able to wield lightning, throwing shade at Rio for being unable to wield any form of magic. Seeing as Alphonse and his friend are mocking Rio, Celia asks for the two to demonstrate their lightning control, watching as the two boys show off their magic circle. Just as Celia suspected, the boys have yet to master even the basic lightning spell, shutting all the blinds and dimming the room. Celia states that although a person's affinity dictates the user's ability to wield magic, a person's use of artifacts and training also play a crucial role. As a demonstration, Celia combines 2 spells, conjuring multiple light balls that explode, lighting up the darkened room. With Rio amazed by Celia's amazing feat, he secretly wonders why he's able to copy Celia's spell, but with a smaller output. Wrapping up the class, one of the students, Stuart, praises Celia for her amazing feat earlier, turning to Rio only to scold him for flirting with Celia. Not wanting any trouble, Rio apologizes all whilst Flora watches, but Celia steps in, asking Stuart to stand down and not make a fool of himself. As Rio leaves the room, Flora wonders if she should have said anything, but Christina reminds Flora that not intervening and not causing a scene was the right thing to do, something Rio understands very well. Cutting to their students' next exercise, the students are tasked with an outdoor practicum in hopes to test how well the students have learnt military exercises. When Flora gets nervous, Rana reassures Flora that most activities are done in teams and that they shouldn't be facing anything too dangerous. Taking charge, Alphen states that they'll be taking the shortest path to reach their goal, with a plan to finish before sunset. Speaking up, Rana mentions how the woody terrain should actually take twice as long as Alphonse plans, but Alphonse reveals that he's already mapped out a route for them to take. Apparently, Stuart had helped Alphonse survey the forest, settling on a short route that should give them an advantage. When Rana wonders if this tactic could be considered cheating, Alphonse reminds Rana that knowledge is key in battle, and seeing as Christina isn't against it, Alphonse orders everyone to get ready. Off to the side, Stuart tells Rio he should be grateful, ordering Rio to carry all of the team's luggage. When Flora offers to help carry some of the luggage, Rio reassures Flora it's fine, annoying Flora as she complains to Christina about how unfair Rio is being treated. At that moment, the students are ambushed by a swarm of goblins, but remaining calm, Alphonse readies his blade, ordering his vanguard to follow suit after they've physically enhanced themselves. Easily slaying the swarm, Alphonse thanks his men, ordering Rio to stop dozing off as Rio seems to have sensed something nearby. Having witnessed everything, a shady hooded man wonders if he should use the opportunity to test Rio's true capabilities. As the gang of students reach the end of their map, Alphonse suddenly realizes that they are standing before a cliff, shaken as he wonders if the map was wrong. When the students begin pressuring Alphonse to make a decision, they all suddenly spot several orcs appear, all beginning to panic. As Alphonse tries to calm everyone down, Stuart is suddenly cut by one of the orcs' spears, stuttering around only to accidentally shove Flora off a cliff. Reacting fast enough, Rio physically enhances his body, leaping towards Flora, only to push Flora back onto the cliff as Rio himself free falls down. Having been saved, Flora worries about Rio, but Christina and the other students finally shake off their nerves, getting into formation only to slay the rogue orcs. Back with Rio, he seemed perfectly fine, having used some last-second wind magic to soften his fall, but Rio does mention how use of magic is quite peculiar, wondering if the spirit he met long ago was the cause of this. Seeing as Rio should head back to the group, we cut to Stuart, who seems to be interrogated for pushing Flora off the cliff. Guilty, Stuart instead spins up a lie, stating that it was actually Rio that pushed Flora, something that Flora disagrees with. Sadly, since they have no time, the students agree that they should find their way out of the forest first and return with a search party for Rio, but Flora is very against it, stating that she'll go and find Rio herself if no one is willing to. Out of nowhere, a massive beast appears from the forest, prompting Christina to attempt to shoot it down with some lightning, but the beast nonchalantly deflects the projectile. Taking charge, Alphonse orders the rear guard to enhance the frontliners, watching as the vanguard charge towards the beast, but sadly the beast swat away the frontline with ease. With no choice, Alphonse orders for a retreat, reassuring Christina that Flora must have escaped already, but it turns out that Flora had stayed and is instead healing an injured student. Discovering Flora's location, the beast slowly makes its way over to Flora, but before it can reach out to Flora, Rio appears, severing its arm. Buying time for the princess and the injured student to escape, Rio runs circles around the monster, wondering why he blew his cover to save Flora. As Rio goes on the defense, he patiently waits for an opening, leaping forwards only to decapitate the monster with a single slash. Hearing the other students nearby, Rio decides to leave first, running through the forest all whilst the hooded man recognizes Rio's black hair as a user of the spirit arts. That evening, Celia heads to the headmaster's office to report her findings on old monsters, but before she can knock, she overhears that Rio is nowhere to be found. Charles begins defending Stuart's name, advising the headmaster to prioritize the safety of the students over a mere orphan boy, something the headmaster agrees with as they all agree to blame the incident on Rio. That night, Celia can't help but think about Rio's well-being, completely infatuated when she hears Rio's voice, rushing to embrace him. As both sit down, Celia feels sorry for Rio, as he is now blamed for something he didn't do, but Rio reassures Celia that it was inevitable, especially since he is not of noble status. With Celia confirming that Rio will be heading to the Yagumo region, Rio promises to write letters to keep Celia updated on his adventures, uttering that he'll be using the alias of Haruto to send these letters. With nothing else to say, Celia asks that Rio come back one day, but as Rio leaves, Celia cries that she'll be waiting for Rio's letters and his return. At the same time, we see Charles visiting a strange person, giving them the scent of Rio only to order for Rio's assassination. As 3 days pass by, Rio began writing his letters to Celia, having made it to the market town Amanda within the Galar Kingdom. Heading towards the city gates, Rio checks to see if he is among the wanted list, relieved as the news for his capture has spread too fast. As Rio heads through town, a mysterious figure can be seen tailing him. But when Rio turns to check, he doesn't see anyone, brushing it off as his paranoia. Passing a stall, Rio gets intrigued hearing that they sell pasta, a dish created by Lady Lisa Lott, the governor of Amanda. Seeing as the pasta dish is similar to the noodles in the previous world, Rio decides to order a bowl, feeling nostalgic with every bite. Continuing on his journey, Rio knows he must head to Yagumo, but stopping at a nearby guild, Rio reasons he should at least purchase some noodles for his long journey. Right outside of the Merchants Guild, Rio overhears people selling meat minju, something Rio also recognizes for his past life. But upon heading into the Rika Merchant Guild, Rio is asked to take off his goods and weapons. Happy to comply, Rio asks where he can store them, surprising Latte, who notices that Rio has black hair. As his personal escort, Latte shows Rio around the place, helping him pick up and order various items from their store. Asked to wait a bit, Latte and her associate pack up the items Rio ordered, worried that it may be too heavy to transport, but Rio reassures them he is quite strong. Seeing the way Rio sips on the black tea, Latte wonders why Rio enjoys black tea so much, impressed to learn that Rio picked up the habit from a friend. As Latte and Rio chat a bit more, Rio takes the chance to write a letter, informing Celia that he won't be able to write any more letters whilst in the Straw region. With Rio heading off, Latte's full name is revealed to be Lisa Lot, and her associate's name is Cosette. Making his way through a forest, Rio stumbles upon a wounded girl, choosing to check up on them, but suddenly senses something is off. Right on cue, the injured girl tosses a poison dart at Rio, forcing him to tank the shot, only to kick the girl away. Assessing the girl, Rio notices her to be a beast person, but Rio neutralizes the poison. Surprised, the girl leaps forward with her blade, aiming at Rio's head, but Rio manages to evade, retaliating with some projectiles of his own. Impressed by the girl's speed, Rio realizes the girl is now only layering a movement buff, both rushing each other. As Rio fends of the girl's advances, the girl wonders how a mere human could match her speed, but seeing as the girl is too focused on his blade, Rio takes advantage by disarming the girl with his fists. Attempting to retaliate, the girl lunges towards Rio's body, but having lured her in, Rio finally manages to pin the girl down, but out of nowhere the girl begins to act strange, calling out to her mother for help. With no other choice, Rio puts the girl to sleep, tying her up only to realize the girl has been wearing a collar of submission. Having read up on such a collar in the past, Rio manages to replicate a spell to dispel the collar, but Rio can't help but feel some familiarity with the girl. Flashing back, the girl's name is revealed to be Latifa, but as she wakes up she mentions how in her past life she was named Endo Susan, a name Stuart, her slave owner, doesn't recognize. Growing up, Stuart would force Latifa into submission with the cursed collar, something Latifa grew to submit to. Having woken up, Latifa is on edge around Rio, attempting to break out of her binds, but no luck. When Rio states that he only wants to talk, Latifa gets flashbacks of Stuart torturing her, but Rio reassures Latifa that the collar controlling her has been removed, bringing Latifa to tears. Now more tamed, Rio asks who sent Latifa. Sad to learn that Latifa doesn't know much about her masters, but Latifa does reveal that Stuart was a part of the household that ordered her around. Now knowing that Stuart's family called for a hit on him, Rio chooses to be more careful moving forward, but before Rio releases Latifa, he asks if Latifa plans to attack him. Confirming that Latifa no longer has any bloodlust, Rio sets Latifa free, returning all her stuff. Seeing as Latifa looks confused, Rio remembers that beast people are normally hunted and made slaves. Therefore, Rio suggests that Latifa head east where she'll be able to reunite with other demi-humans. Just like that, Rio takes his leave. But not even a few seconds later, Rio notices that Latifa is slowly following behind him. Demanding to know what Latifa has planned, Latifa shyly utters that she wants to travel with Rio, but Rio reminds Latifa that he's still wary of her, as she did just try to slay him. Apologizing, Latifa offers to become Rio's slave if it means he'll trust her, but Rio fears that it'll only be tortuous with that collar around Latifa's neck. Seeing as Latifa is clearly lost, Rio agrees to allow Latifa to accompany him, prompting Latifa to toss away the collar as they continue their journey. As a quick break, Rio whips up a quick sandwich for Latifa, finding it adorable that Latifa is treasuring her first genuine meal. Having crossed over into the wilderness, Rio notes how they are finally where the beast people reside, but seeing as it's getting late, they both decide to set up camp. With Celia receiving Rio's most recent letter, Latifa is seen recognizing the pasta Rio crafted, making Rio wonder if the girl is also from Japan. As the two eat their fill, they clock out for the night, but Rio overhears Latifa uttering that she wants to return home to her family in Japan. Comforting her through the night, Latifa awakens beside Rio, flustered to see Rio resembles the boy on the train with her. When Latifa tries calling Rio her big brother, Rio awakens, scaring Latifa as she bumps her head. Seeing as Latifa was reincarnated and forced into being a slave at such a young age, Rio decides to take care of her as much as he can, both venturing through various terrain and slaying various creatures as they venture deeper into the wilderness. Having set up camp, the two rest up, only for Rio to ask if Latifa can see the massive tree nearby, But Latifah gets confused, mentioning how she can only see trees from the forest. With the two making their way towards the massive-looking tree, Latifah notes how she's beginning to pick up strange scents, something Rio believes means they are almost out of the forest. Since it's getting late, they once again set up camp, but seeing as Latifah is still having nightmares, Rio helps by quelling the dark thoughts. Out of nowhere, Rio spots a mysterious-looking wolf observing them, suddenly blinded by a mysterious light. Having been temporarily blinded by the bright light, Rio barely manages to dodge a smash from his enemies, having no choice but to slam the ground to determine the number of enemies. With the enemies revealed to be other beast people, they begin deducing that Rio wields a form of spirit arts and had managed to determine their numbers, suddenly hearing Rio offering to talk things out. With Yuzuma, the winged girl, worried about Rio's intentions, Sarah, their leader, reasons that they should hear Rio out, asking Orphea and Alma to investigate Rio's campsite. As Sarah speaks with Rio, Orphea and Alma suddenly realize that Rio has put Latifah to sleep with a spirit art, alerting Yuzuma as she instantly rushes to strike Rio down. As Rio attempts to heal himself, the girls grow even more surprised at Rio's capabilities. But seeing as things have escalated, Sarah declares that they'll be taking Rio in for an investigation. Before Rio can explain the situation, the girls manage to restrain and knock Rio out. As Rio sleeps, he's suddenly suspended in a blue abyss, spotting the pink-haired spirit floating above him, calling out Haruto. Surprised to see her once more, Rio asks how the girl knows him. But before she can reveal anything, she disappears, promising to always be his. Just as he wakes up, Rio sees me calling out to her. But in the real world, Orphea and Alma spots Rio squirming whilst chained up. As Rio tries to figure out where he is, he suddenly spots Latifah rushing into his room, hugging him tightly as she was worried Rio left her. When Latifah demands to know who locked Rio up, the four girls apologetically enter, standing by as one of the elders enters. Asking for Rio's forgiveness, the elders ask to learn more about who Rio and Latifah are. But first, Yuzuma begs for forgiveness, prompting the other girls to follow suit. With the elder annoyed at what the girls have done, she states that Yuzuma will be punished later, but Rio is more concerned about his shackles. With Rio now freed, the elder tells Rio he'll be meeting the town's elders tomorrow, but for tonight, he is free to rest and use the room with Latifah. The next morning, Rio is guided up one of the town's massive trees, amazed to learn that the massive tree that led him here is known as the World Tree, a location where the Dryads reside. The elder gets intrigued, learning that Rio was able to see the tree at all, since the tree has been cloaked by illusion magic and would require mastering over spirit arts to break. Amazed to hear that Rio had been self-taught since birth, Rio is finally guided to the room with the other elders, all introducing themselves as Sildora, Ursula, and finally the dwarf Dominic. When Rio formally introduces himself, Sildora along with the other elders take the chance to apologize for treating Rio so badly, even after rescuing one of their beast kin from slavery. Rio reassures the elders that he was simply doing what was right, suddenly asked by the elders what Rio would like as a reward for his kind act. Rio initially asked for Latifah to be given a home in their village, but when Rio hears that the elders were already planning on doing so, Rio asks if he can stay in the village alongside Latifah for a bit. Happy to let Rio stay, the elders all welcome Rio as part of their family. But Rio is also curious if he could learn how to better control his spirit arts from an experienced master. Happy to oblige, the elders begin to wrap up the meeting, but suddenly a Dryad appears. Introducing herself as Dryas, the spirit of the World Tree, Dryas reveals that she senses a sleeping spirit from within Rio, but Rio is confused. Dryas asks if Rio is unable to control magic, something Rio confirms, prompting Dryas to have a better look into Rio, leaning in close only to sense a massive amount of stored-up OD. When Rio asks what Dryas has discovered, Dryas reveals that Rio has a person-shaped spirit within him, one of the rarest occurrences for humans. Dryas states that spirits that take the shape of a human like herself are usually classified as second-rate and higher, But seeing as the sleeping spriting within Rio is also a human-shaped spirit, Dryas believes that Rio is housing one of the 6 great spirits. Spirits believed to have all been wiped out during the Divine Demon War 1,000 years ago. Seeing as Rio is unsure what to make of things, the Elder surmises that Rio will be getting special treatment moving forward. Happy to hear that, Rio is escorted to his new home, meeting up with Latifa and the other girls who show Rio around his new home, even sharing a meal together. During the meal, Rio notices that one of the food items closely resembles rice, getting excited. But as the gang cleans up, Sarah reveals that Urujula has tasked the girls to serve and stay with Rio and Latifa. Right on cue, Ursula shows up, apologizing as Sarah and the other girls will be staying by Rio's side as a way to atone for discriminating against a human. Plus, the girls will also try to grow close to Latifa, making sure she doesn't always have to depend on Rio. As Rio and Latifa spend more time in the village, they slowly grow attached to the village's culture, picking up various skills and habits along with spending time with all the residents in town. During the Grand Spirit Festival, the elders chose to offer and worship the Dryads for lending them a home. But at the same time, we see 2 mysterious men flying on their griffin to a certain location. Having landed, the adventurer waits outside for the hooded man, revealed to be Rice. When the adventurer spots Rice returning out of the cave with an egg, the adventurer wonders what the egg could be used for, but Rice simply states that he plans to perform an experiment with the egg. As Rice mounts the griffin, the adventurer clings onto the egg, but unknowingly to the adventurer. Rice had planned for the parents of the eggs to follow close behind them. With it already being 1 year since Rio and Latifa joined the village, the elders announced Rio and Latifa as sworn members of their village, both receiving a blessing kiss by Dryas. As the village parties throughout the night, Rio wounds up surrounded by some ladies, but Orphea and Sarah in their drunken state can't help but feel Rio is still wary of them. Seeing all the commotion, Alma joins in, asking Rio to relax, especially now since they're all family. Realizing that he was a little stiff, Rio apologizes, promising to be more approachable. Changing topics, the girls rush to stock up on more drinks, something Latifa wants to watch. But seeing as Latifa has grown closer to the others, Rio reasons with Ursula that it's about time that he tells Latifa the bad news and finally leaves the village. At the same time, we see that Rice and the adventurer have settled down for the night, but just in case, Rice states that he'll be quickly surveying the area. For safety, Rice has the adventurer swallow an artifact, instructing the man to escape with the griffin if something bad were to happen. With Rice disappearing into the forest, he takes flight, confirming that the monsters following them have finally caught up to their location, curious as to how everything will transpire. At the same time, Rio and Latifa are out on a midnight stroll, but after walking long enough, Rio stops to ask if Latifa is enjoying her time in the village. Happy to hear that Latifa considers the village her home, Rio sadly utters that he'll need to leave the village soon, refusing to allow Latifa to follow him since his next journey will be dangerous. Frustrated, Latifa runs off, but cutting to the elders, they inform Sarah and the girls that there has been a strange breach in their home barrier. With the girls rushing towards the scene of the danger, we cut to Reese, who has returned to the monster's nest, pleased to see only the eggs of the monsters remain, gleefully collecting them. Back with the girls, they seem to have located 2 living creatures nearby, identifying them as a human and a griffin. When the girls go in for a closer inspection, the adventurer suddenly awakens, slowly backing away when the girls demand to know what the adventurer is holding. Refusing to answer, the adventurer manages to escape on the griffin, coincidentally riding off towards the village, forcing the girls to try and shoot him down. With no luck, the girls chase after the man, but out of nowhere wyverns appear, seemingly swatting at the adventurer. Seeing as the wyverns are solely focused on the adventurer, the girls deduce that the man must be carrying a wyvern egg, declaring that they are to stop the wyverns from entering the village at all cost. Having finished up stealing all the eggs, Rice makes use of the artifact the man swallowed, destroying it and taking the man's life. Seeing the man fall, Sarah instructs Alma to take care of the wyverns, lending Alma her bond spirit. On the ground, we see Latifa has accidentally stumbled onto the corpse of the man along with the shattered wyvern egg. horrified when she spots an enraged wyvern land beside her. Back in the village, the residents run for cover, alerting Rio as he learns that wyverns have entered the village's forest and the exact location where Latifa ran off into. Able to barely evade and dodge the wyvern's lethal slashes, Latifa cries for help, giving Alma enough time to intervene and protect her. When Alma's basic strikes fail to harm the wyvern, Alma calls for her spirit bond lion, combining the lion's fire attack and the wolf's ice magic. But even with such a powerful combination, Alma is easily knocked aside by the wyvern. Suggesting that they both flee, Latifa realizes that Alma is their last line of defense before the wyvern reaches the village. So Latifa chooses to distract the wyvern to buy Alma some time. Before Alma can complete her incantations, the wyvern manages to corner Latifa. But before Latifa can be squished, Rio appears, bringing Latifa to safety. Seeing as Latifa isn't hurt, Rio charges directly at the wyvern, beating and bashing the monster with his fist. When the wyvern releases a breath of fire, Rio simply counters with some wind magic. But when the wyvern charges up another breath, Rio capitalizes by closing the wyvern's mouth, having the breath harm the wyvern from the inside out. Having defeated the black wyvern, the girls realize that the remaining wyverns have begun to flee, impressed to learn that Rio single-handedly took down the pack leader. The next morning, Latifa apologized for running off during the previous night, admitting that she was simply scared she would never get to see Rio ever again. Understanding Celia's feelings, Rio reassures Latifa that he'll always treasure Latifa as his little sister, something Latifa is very grateful for. Upon hearing that Rio plans to head further east to visit his family's hometown, something that makes Latifa open up as she reveals that she had been reincarnated and originally lived in Japan. Not surprised, Rio admits that he too was reincarnated, shocking Latifa as they both have had to adapt to this cruel new world, both growing closer as a result of this. With the day of Rio's departure arriving, the elders all choose to give Rio with some final gifts. First, Dominic shows off a mithril crafted blade meant to absorb Rio's spirit arts along with armor crafted from the wyvern Rio slayed. Next, Ursula hands Rio a bag of assorted medicines and elixirs along with various food items and drinks. Finally, Sildora chooses to give Rio a space-time cache, an item Rio knows is very valuable, gratefully accepting the items. Having used the space-time cache to store all of his items, Rio promises to return if the village ever needs him, saying his final goodbyes to the village and Latifa only to fly off. Cutting to Celia, she still has yet to receive any updates on what Rio has been up to, but Rio seems to have finally continued on his journey back to his hometown. Having been 2 weeks since Rio entered the Yagumo region, Rio manages to track down his family's hometown, greeting the villagers as he asks to meet with the village elder. Speaking up, Ruri points out that her grandma is the head of the town, taking Rio towards her as she asks Seo to follow them. Upon entering the elder's hut, the elder immediately is suspicious of Rio's intentions, but still introduces herself as Yaba. Sitting down, Yaba asks what Rio is looking for, surprised to hear Rio wants to meet his mother and father's family. Hearing that Rio's parents' names are Zen and Ayam, Yaba asks for Ruri and Seo to get back to work, impressed that Rio had made it so far even after losing his father and mother at such a young age. Rio reveals that he would like to hold a proper burial for his parents wherever their hometown was, something Yabo appreciates as she reveals that she is Zen's mother, making Rio her grandson. Speechless to have finally met his father's mother, Rio and Yaba head to existing graves for Rio's parents, kneeling down as Rio declares he's finally home. Yaba mentions how these graves were constructed not too long after Rio's parents left town, hinting at a reason for the village to suspect Rio's parents wouldn't make it back to the village alive. Yaba promises to tell Rio the secret if Rio's lies with them for a while, something Rio isn't against, especially since his only family now is Ruri, who is Rio's cousin, being 15 and 1 year older than Rio. With Yaba promising to keep Rio's ancestry a secret, Yaba heads home first, but soon after collecting his thoughts, Rio heads to stay with Yaba and Ruri, enjoying dinner together. The next day, Rio wakes up early, offering to make dinner. Upon greeting Ruri, Ryo swiftly diverts his eyes, flustering Ruri as rushes to change out of a revealing fit. Tasked with making the main dish, Ryo overhears that Seo and Shin will be joining them for breakfast, impressed to learn that Ruri and Yaba can both use spirit arts. Showing off, Ryo conjures hot water with his own spirit arts, impressing Ruri as they manage to whip up a feast for breakfast. Greeting Shin and Seo. Shin is revealed to be Seo's older brother, both siblings being very close with Yaba's family. Digging into the meal, Shin is amazed by the feast Ryo cooked up, stuffing himself only to lay down. After breakfast, Yaba asks for Shin to take Ryo to Dola, asking for Shin to help Ryo to become a hunter. Shin points out that being a hunter is no easy task, but hearing that Ryo is more gifted than he looks, Shin orders Ryo to accompany him on Ryo's first hunting job. As Ryo leaves with Shin, Ruri teases Seo for being so shy around Ryo, cutting to later that day, where Ryo easily snipes down rabbits and birds with a bow and arrow, all while Shin falls short. As Dola praises Ryo for his great work today, Shin gets frustrated leaving first, but Dallo asks if Ryo can join them starting tomorrow to hunt for more food. Happy to oblige, Ryo begins heading home, feeling dirty from all the hunting. Making use of his spirit arts, Ryo creates an outdoor bath, creating a heated water source with his spirit arts, only to de-stress after a good hunt. Outside the bath, Ruri and Seo get intrigued, both taking turns to admire Ryo's elegant smell after taking a bath. Joining the conversation, Shin and his friends berate Ryo for creating stuff he isn't meant to, but Ruri and Seo steps in, defending Ryo as they declare Shin is just jealous. Throughout the next couple of days, Ryo continues to draw the attention of the town's girls, all whilst helping out, even allowing Ruri and Seo to use the bath as well. Seeing as everything is going well, Yaba asks for Shin to accompany and guard the town's merchants when they sell their harvest in the royal capital. But suddenly Yaba and Ryo hear Shin is getting into a fight. Revealed to be Gon, the son and his friends of a neighboring village, Gon begins teasing Shin for being still so weak, taking peeks at Ruri and Seo. When Ruri orders Gon piss off, Gon simply reminds Ruri that she'll one day be engaged to him, both being heirs to their respective villages. Having heard enough, Shin tries to remove Gon with force, but Gon simply strangles Shin, forcing Yaba to intervene. As Ryo watches on, Yaba apologizes for Shin's actions, but scolds Gon for provoking him, offering Gon and his party a place to stay for the night. Happy to hear such an offer, Gon heads elsewhere, passing by Ryo, but when Gon tries to assert dominance over Ryo, he ends up hurting himself, quickly running off. That night, Shin asks Seo to stay with Yaba and Seo, fearing what Gon and his boys will do. Before the girls head off to sleep, Ryo gives them a protective amulet, cutting to Gon and his boys plotting to do unspeakable things in the village after they repair their carriage. The next day, Ryo greets Saga Hate, giving Hate and his men a tour of the village as Hate collects tax on the village's harvest. That evening, Ryo continues to train his sword, asking for the girls to come out if they're curious. Apologizing for spying on Ryo, Ruri and Seo ask why Ryo trains so much every day, finding it romantic that Ryo has been training to protect his childhood crush, but fears his crush may be forgotten about him already. That night, as the girls sleep, a visitor enters their room, signaling to Ryo that there is an intruder. Muffling Ruri's screams, Gon demands that the girls not make a noise, threatening to harm them if they do. Before Gon and do anything else, Ryo takes out Gon's two boys, demanding to know what Gon is doing. Rushing to attack Ryo, Gon is instantly flung through a nearby wall, helplessly watching as Ryo begins crushing his throat. Knowing Gon will pass too easily, Ryo switches to pummeling Gon, all whilst the girls watch in horror. Luckily, Hate intervenes, buying enough time for Yaba to arrive, calming Ryo down as they take the girls elsewhere. As Hate heals Gon, he learns that Gon was the cause of this mess, declaring that Gon will be punished heavily for his acts. Satisfied, Ryo heads elsewhere, pissed that he let his emotions overcome him, having seen his mother's death reflected on Ruri just then. The next day, Ryo apologizes to everyone for the trouble, but Hate happily reports that Gon and his boys will be taken in and punished, personally thanking Ryo for restraining and punching the boys for their disgusting act. Seeing Ryo so calm and apologetic even after doing the right thing, Yaba mentions how Ryo reminds her of someone, all heading to prepare breakfast. With preparations being made, Yaba thanks Hate for bringing Gon and his boys to justice, but does ask that Hate pass down a letter to his superior. As Ryo, Ruri, and Shin accompany Hate to the royal capital, it takes several days to finally arrive, settling into an inn in the evening. Deciding to head out, Dola, Shin, and Ryo watch as Gon and his boys are taken elsewhere, all three heading out for a meal to cheer things up. Served a bowl of kamutin, Shin and Dola are so happy that Ryo also appreciates the meal's amazing taste. Leaving the store, Shin thanks Ryo for protecting his sister, mentioning how it would be great to bring Seo to enjoy a bowl of kamutin as well. The next day, Ryo and Seo run some errands, leading Ryo to suggest they eat some kamutin, having heard Shin wanted Seo to make him some at home, but Seo didn't know what kamutin was. Happy to hear Shin is simply looking after Seo, the two pass by an accessory shop. Hearing the shopkeeper praise Ryo and Seo for looking great as a couple. Clearing up the misunderstanding, Seo is asked to pick an accessory, trying on a flower hairpin. Complimenting Seo's gorgeous looks, Ryo agrees to pay 2 silver for the hairpin, something that makes the store owner suggest Seo claim Ryo before he's taken by other girls. As the two continue their errands, Ryo suddenly spots several men kidnapping a girl, swiftly intervening as he saves the girl. Turning to the girl's bodyguard, Ryo learns the girl is named Komomo, returning her to the bodyguard, only to quickly leave, not wanting any trouble. That evening, Hate speaks with his father, relieved to hear that a young man had saved Komomo that evening. Handed the letter from Yaba, Hate's father begins to shake as he reads the letter, demanding to know where Ryo is. With Ryo and Seo returning home, the men begin teasing Ryo for buying Seo a gift, but before Ryo can leave, he's stopped by Hate and his parents. Introduced as Saga Guki and Kyoko, Guki and Kyoko reveal that they both used to work for Lady Karasuki Ayam, Ryo's mother. Hearing that his mother was royalty, Ryo calms himself learning that his father Zen was a soldier for the Karasuki kingdom almost 20 years ago. Due to Zen's capabilities with spirit arts and the sword, the king had given Zen the title of noble warrior, ultimately meeting Guki, who recommended Zen guard the royal family. Having been assigned to look after Ayam, Zen and Ayam fell in love, but when Ayam's family began peace talks with a neighboring kingdom, the enemy's prince grew to like Ayam. One night, the prince had planned for Ayam to be kidnapped, but having discovered the prince's plan, Zen had stopped the kidnapping but was ultimately forced to leave town with Ayam, fearing Ayam and himself would be targeted further. Hearing all of this, Ryo gets pissed, something Guki doesn't blame Ryo for feeling, but Guki asks that Ryo meet with the king and queen tomorrow. The next day, Ryo stands before King Hamura and Queen Shizuku, all agreeing to be less formal, especially since Ryo is their grandson. Seeing the queen resemble his mother, Ryo becomes more relaxed, offering to disclose how his parents lived. Ryo states that Zen had passed before he could make sense of the world. As for Ayam, she was slaughtered by Lucius, a close friend of Zen who would help Ayam out frequently. One day, Ayam had left to run errands, leaving Ryo alone only for Lucius to greet Ryo. Restraining Ryo, Lucius uttered something about demons hiding amongst the humans, all whilst Lucius forced Ryo to drink a mysterious substance. Having returned home, Ayam was unfortunately attacked and killed right in front of Ryo's eyes. With everyone saddened to hear Ryo's unfortunate fate, Ryo does point out that he was given a second chance after being orphaned off, having been able to attend school from the ages of 7 to 12 and even return to his homeland. The king asks why Ryo doesn't hate them, but Ryo points out that it wasn't the king or queen's fault that his parents had to live in such a remote area, blaming everything on Lucius as he did end up slaying his mother. Although the king understands Ryo's revenge-filled eyes, the king asks for Ryo to spar with Guki, the strongest in their kingdom, fearing that Ryo may lose to Lucius when the time comes. Agreeing to train with Guki, Ryo heads to Guki's home, greeting Aoi, who is shocked to reunite with the man who saved Komomo's life. As Gouki and Ryo prepare for their sparring match, Ryo ends up making the first move, terrifying Gouki as Ryo is very skilled for his age. As both men exchange blows, Gouki knows that Ryo won't lose with ordinary swordplay, opting to infuse his blade with some magic. Seeing Gouki fire an air slash with his blade, Ryo instantly counters with a magical blast of his own, blinding Gouki only to close the gap with his sword. With Gouki admitting defeat, onlookers are shocked to see Ryo has won, earning praise from the king and queen himself. Seeing as Ryo won't be staying in town for long, Ryo asks for permission to reveal his heritage to Ruri, something the king isn't opposed to. As a few more days pass by, Seo and the party return back to the village, all whilst Ryo visits his parents' graves once more, promising to do what he knows is right. Back at home, Ryo tells Ruri about his royal lineage, but Ruri giggles, believing Yaba and Ryo are playing a prank on her. When Yaba reveals that all the elders in the village already knew that Ryo and his parents were royalty, Ruri gets flustered, bowing her head as she apologizes for acting so casually to Ryo. Ryo reassures Ruri that he isn't technically a royal. Having grown up as a commoner, therefore, he would like Ruri to treat him as normal. Having lightened the mood, Ryo mentions how he'll be leaving the village in a year's time, dead set on returning back to where he was raised, hoping to reunite with Latifa. As Yaba welcomes Ryo to come and go anytime, Ryo continues to help out around the village, greeting all the girls, only to make them all jealous seeing how close Ryo and Ruri have gotten. Continuing to hunt and prepare for the colder seasons, Gouki and Hate visit the gang, all rolling out plans to improve the village. Working hard, Ruri is praised for her amazing work, teased by Dola when he points out Ruri and Ryo would make a good couple. Listening in on everything, Seo gets jealous, quickly getting back to work when she sees Ryo approaching her. Ryo offers to help Seo out, mentioning how Seo needs to take over when Ryo leaves, surprising Seo. Hearing that Ryo won't be able to visit frequently and plans to leave in the upcoming Harvest Festival, Seo begins to tear up, brushing off as having some dirt in her eyes. That evening, Seo returns to her home, breaking down once more at the thought of Ryo leaving. Just then Shin appears, demanding to know who made Seo cry, but upon learning that Ryo plans to leave the village soon, Shin rushes off to confront him. During the night, Yaba and Ryo prepare dinner, suddenly receiving a knock at the door. When Yaba asks what Shin wants, Shin begins to beg for Ryo to not leave the village, but Seo rushes to apologize for Shin's selfish request. Before Shin can say anything further, Seo drags Shin away. As the Harvest Festival approaches, we see Seo secretly practicing her spirit arts along with fortifying her body, all while Shin oversees her training. With the Harvest Day arriving, Gouki puts on a show, asking for any challengers only to single out Dola. Seeing everyone having fun, the girls begin to serve Kamuden, all whilst Dola and Gouki wrestle each other. When Gouki wins, Ryo thanks Kyoko for helping out with the festival, suddenly pulled away to have a private chat with Seo. Now alone, Seo confesses her feelings to Ryo, asking for Ryo to take her with him, but Ryo knows that it's impossible. Seo states that she's been training for the past 6 months, but even still Ryo refuses, bringing Seo to tears. As Ryo begins to leave, he apologizes to Shin, revealed to have been hiding nearby. Heading over to Seo, Shin comforts Seo, all whilst a mysterious figure watches the two. That night, Ryo decides to head out first, thanking Ruri and Yaba for all they've done for him. Promising to one day return, Ryo bids the two farewell, heading towards the front of the village only to spot Seo waiting for him. Flashing back, Gouki had been watching Seo's confession, offering a word of advice on how to proceed after being rejected by Ryo. Putting on a smile, Seo wishes nothing but the best for Ryo, grateful that Ryo still cares for her even if he can't reciprocate her feelings. Just like that, Ryo heads off towards the spirit tree, suddenly spotting the girls greeting him. Finally reunited with Latifa, Ryo joins the elders for a welcoming meal, telling them stories about his adventure along with Ruri and Yaba. When the elders ask how long Rio will be staying, Rio sadly tells them he can only stay for a few months, but promises to visit often. Ursula asks if Rio needs anything on his travels. Surprised to hear Rio wants to create a house he can store in his space-time cache, something that intrigues Dominic. With Dominic promising to figure something out, Latifa and Rio head home, greeting the girls as they all point out how mature Rio's gotten. Seeing Alma and Sarah teasing each other for liking Rio, Rio thanks the girls for welcoming him home so openly, complimenting how much Almas has grown along with how beautiful Orphea has gotten. Jealous, Latifa offers to take a bath with Rio, but as we cut to the next day, Rio seems to have awoken beside a pink-haired girl, flustering Latifa and the others as they demand to know who Rio's new friend is. When Rio fails to explain who the new pink-haired girl is, the other girls continue to press Rio for an answer, ultimately waking up the girl, who reveals herself to the spirit bonded with Haruto. Wrapping the girl up, Rio realizes the spirit is the one that taught him about OD back in the slums, curious as to why she was asleep inside of him all this time. Asking the other girls if this is a normal occurrence for spirits, Sarah says they're unsure since their spirits aren't humans but take the form of animals. Asking for the spirit's name, Rio is surprised to hear the spirit doesn't have one, asking Rio to give her one. Hearing the spirit call Rio Haruto, the girls wonder why that is so, but Rio says he'll explain later. Out of nowhere, the spirit begins speaking with Rio telepathically, reminding Rio that she knows everything about his past life as Haruto. Seeing Haruto and the spirit acting strange, Latifa wonders what they're doing, but Rio quickly hides their telepathy by asking for more time to name the spirit. The girls add that Rio can ask the elders and Dryas for naming advice, something Rio isn't against. When the spirit stands up, Rio fears the spirit will expose her body once more, but is shocked to see the spirit manifest clothes using her spirit art. Getting a better look at the spirit as a whole, Rio is reminded of me, blurting out that he wants to name the spirit Aisha, meaning spring. With the girls all accepting Aisha as their big sister, Rio heads over to introduce Aisha to the elders, piquing their interest when they hear Aisha has no memories of her past. At that moment, Dryas appears, having sensed a powerful spirit appearing within her domain. Introducing themselves to each other, Dryas asks if Aisha can remember anything, but sadly Aisha only remembers things about Haruto. Rio explains that Haruto was his name before he was wanted by authorities in Strahl, but Dryas asks that Rio keep his past a secret for now. Turning to Aisha, Dryas asks for Aisha's elemental affinity, shocking everyone when Aisha mentions she is proficient in all of them. Putting her to the test, Aisha is pitted against Rio, with Dryas asking Rio to test Aisha with his full power. When the duel starts, Aisha immediately propels forward, forcing Rio to evade as they both exchange kicks and punches, techniques Rio recognizes Aisha may be copied from him. Imbuing themselves with magic, they take their fight into the air, both canceling each other's movements only to fall back to the ground. Seeing Rio fire off some ice magic, Aisha simply vanishes, reappearing behind Rio only to copy his exact ice spell. Negating the ice attack, Rio fires off some fireballs, following up with a torrential wind spell to disrupt Aisha's view. Watching as Aisha copies Rio's exact wind spell, Dryas announces the end of the duel, fearing that the village may suffer heavy damage if both continue. Having certified Aisha as an all-rounded elemental spirit, Dryas says she'll personally educate Aisha on the duties of spirits. As days pass, Aisha is brought in as a fellow citizen of the Dryas Forest, spending time with Rio and the others, leading up to the day where Dominic unveils his transportable home for Rio. Grateful for such a gift, Rio says he wants to pay his respects to the elders for always helping him out, shocking Latifa as she hears Rio plans to leave in 2 days' time. With the girls getting ready for dinner, Sarah pulls Rio aside, asking Rio to spend his last few days with Latifa, something Rio admits he forgot to do ever since Aisha appeared. Clearing his mind in his portable home's bathhouse, Rio suddenly spots Latifa join him, ordering Latifa to stay back as he doesn't want any misunderstandings. As a compromise, Rio allows Latifa to wash his back, something Latifa immediately accepts. Seeing as this is the perfect time, Latifa asks if Rio's previous live's name was Haruto, something Rio confirms seeing Latifa so happy. Latifa reveals that her last memory in her previous life was on a bus before it was struck by a train, something Rio already knew since he was on that exact train. Apologizing once more for not spending more time with Latifa, Rio promises to return, something Latifa is grateful for. With the day of Rio's departure arriving, the elders hand Rio a spirit teleportation stone, an item that allows the holder to teleport back to their village, but only works one way. Additionally, Sildora hands Rio an item that will help change Rio's hair color, something to help Rio navigate through Strahl now that he is wanted. Promising to return, Rio sets off with Aisha, both heading to Strahl, but Rio first wants to visit Celia. Cutting to a gorgeous mansion, we see Celia outside preparing to read a letter, but quickly hides the letter, hearing Charles nearby. When Charles tries to flirt with Celia, Celia pulls back acting shy, but both are interrupted when Charles is summoned promising to return to Celia once everything is settled. As the year 1000 of the Holy Era arrives, Rio finally steps foot back in the kingdom, surprised to see so many people in town. Changing his hair color, Rio heads to a bakery, learning that people have gathered in town to celebrate a noble's wedding. Next, Rio heads towards the academy, making use of Aisha's spirit form to slip past locked doors heading straight for Celia's lab. Upon entering the room, Rio is shocked to see Celia's lab is completely empty, asking Aisha to ask another researcher for the reason. Possessing another researcher, Aisha allows Rio to interrogate the researchers, learning that Celia has since moved to the royal capital and has been scheduled to marry Charles, as Charles and Celia's marriage is the reason everyone is in town. Demanding to know more, the researcher explains that their kingdom of Beltrum lost to the Proxia Empire, leading the current king and their family to lose influence over the throne. To stabilize the country, the House of Duke Arbor negotiated with the House of Count Clare, having Celia be married to Charles to calm the rivalry between the two houses. Fearing that Celia is being forced to marry someone she doesn't love, Rio and Aisha head outside, both detecting that Celia is currently staying at a nearby castle. Wanting to speak to Celia himself, Rio sends Aisha off to scout the location security, but at the same time Celia, Charles, and Celia's father all have dinner. Celia's father apologizes for not seeing her more often, something Celia isn't so stressed about since her father is busy with political work. Raising a toast, Charles reassures Celia's father that their marriage will show everyone that their kingdom is very stable, something Celia's father is glad to hear. Charles takes the chance to bring up rumors regarding the Clare house and how they may be in contact with the previous king, but Claire's father immediately shoots down such rumors. Smirking, Charles states that once the House of Clare and the House of Duke Arbor have assimilated, they'll make sure to keep close watch on everyone, something Claire's father feels guilty for since he's forced to hand over Claire in order to guarantee their house's protection. Outside, Rio floats above the heavily guarded mansion, receiving directions from Aisha, who guides Rio to Celia's room. Having wrapped up dinner, Celia returns to her room, saddened to be unable to express her true feelings and catch up with her father over dinner. Celia feels relieved that her family will be guaranteed a future once she becomes Charles' property, reminiscing on the memories she's shared with Rio, trembling as she prepares to burn Rio's last letter to her. Appearing out of nowhere, Rio greets Celia, removing his dyed hair, only to embrace Celia. Having waited ages to see Rio, Celia gets flustered seeing how much Rio's grown over the 4 years since he's left, but Celia gets excited asking Rio to tell her all about what he's been up to. Preparing some tea for Rio, Celia freezes up hearing that Rio knows about her wedding tomorrow, but calms herself as she knows it's too late. Celia reminds Rio that her marriage to Charles was what is best for her family, but Rio asks if Celia is personally okay with serving Charles for the rest of her life. Beginning to break, Celia desperately asks if Rio would be willing to take her away and marry her. But seeing Rio hesitate, Celia brushes off her cries as jokes, asking Rio to leave. Putting on a smile, Celia asks not to attend her wedding tomorrow as it may be embarrassing, shoving Rio out of her room, only to break down crying happy that Rio had kept his promise and returned. Outside, Rio admits that he is still unsure if Celia is okay with the marriage, apologizing to Aisha as he needs Aisha to investigate further. But Aisha reminds Rio that she will obey Rio's every command. The next morning, as suited up Charles greets Rice, greeting his old friend as Rice congratulates Charles on his wedding, but reminds Charles that they are still technically enemies being from opposing countries. With the two men joking about Charles's future as a husband, Rice suddenly detects a powerful spirit nearby, but in an instant the spirit's presence vanishes. At the same time, Celia puts on her wedding dress, reminding herself to suppress her emotions and simply play along to ensure her family is safe. Asked by Charles to show off her dress, Charles becomes captivated by Celia's beauty, worried that Celia is nervous for the big day. Showing off his 6 other wives, Charles leaves Celia to chat with his wives, prompting Teresina, Charles' first wife, to remind Celia that once Celia has married Charles, Celia is to fall in a line even if Celia had prior affiliation with the royals. Knowing her place, Celia begins to be scolded by Teresina for looking so depressed. But suddenly the girls are notified that Princess Christina has arrived, all bowing their heads as the princess greets them. When Teresina tries to butter up Christina, Christina coldly asks Charles's wives to leave them alone, sitting down to catch up with Celia. Christina congratulates Celia on her wedding day, worried seeing Celia so anxious, but Celia excuses it as her not getting enough sleep. Christina begins recounting how tragic it was that Duke Huguenot fled the kingdom with Flora, ultimately trapping Celia into a political marriage that stole Celia's once innocent smile. Confirming her suspicions, Christina declares she'll set Celia free one day, cutting to Charles and Alfred going on a stroll. As Alfred updates Charles on the security around Charles's wedding, Charles cuts Alfred off, reminding Alfred he is not to step out of line now that Charles himself is in charge. With it being year 1000 of the Holy Era, a swarm of citizens gather to watch Charles and Celia marching through the streets via carriage, all mesmerized by Celia's silver beauty. Leaning in close, Charles whispers how once they kiss, Celia will be his forever, something Celia is forced to accept seeing everyone chanting Charles' name. With every important figure gathered in wait for the wedding ceremony, we spot Rio off in the crowd, thanking Aisha as he was able to finally decide what he must do. Sending Aisha to telepathically speak with Celia, Aisha introduces herself as Rio's friend, asking Celia to look into the crowd, tearing up as she spots Rio has come to attend her special day. When Charles wonders why Celia is crying, Celia plays it off as being excited for her wedding, turning back only to wonder if she had been imagining Rio in the crowd. Having come to a stop, Charles prepares to escort Celia up some stairs, only for Rio to appear rushing towards the main stage. Rushing through the army of guards in his way, Rio is forced to use some wind magic to make his way through the swarm. Seeing the guards now preparing several magic spells, Rio enhances his agility, sprinting past each projectile, scaring the onlookers. Making it closer to Celia's carriage, the guards riding horses prepare enhancement spells of their own, something Charles claims can stop any lowly assassin. Taking a stance, Rio begins dispatching the elite guards with his martial arts, darting towards Charles only to knock him to the ground with a jab to the chest. Now close enough, Rio takes Celia as a hostage, infuriating Count Celia as he demands to know how his daughter has been taken hostage. On top of things, Duke Arbor grows pissed, seeing Charles lose to a single attacker, both demanding to know who the attacker is. Telepathically speaking with Celia, Rio asks Celia to play along. Watching as Rio shouts he despises Charles, all whilst threatening to crush Charles with his foot. Seeing the guards trying to calm down Count Celia and Duke Arbor, Rio asks once again if Celia is okay with proceeding with the wedding, offering to cancel the ceremony if Celia wishes. Celia begins to crumble, hearing that Rio truly values Celia as someone special, admitting that the right thing to do is to marry Charles. But her feelings are telling Celia otherwise. Intrigued by Rio's offer, Celia asks how Rio can rescue her. Shocked to hear Rio will take Celia away, protecting her family along with her father as Rio has no affiliation with Count Celia. Accepting Ryo's offer, Ryo smirks, scolding Charles for looking so pathetic on the floor, only for an army of guards to begin forming around Ryo. Sweeping Celia off her feet, Ryo starts by leaping over a portion of the guards, making a break past the army Charles is commanding. Seeing Ryo leap over the second horde of guards, Alfred Barates Charles' idiotic commands, wondering why Charles is allowing Ryo to get away. Seeing the guard firing projectiles at him, Ryo stops to block the projectiles, catching Rice's attention as Rice fires off a devastating ball of magic of his own, impressed to see Ryo nonchalantly nullify it. With Ryo now being chased by aerial knights, Alfred finally steps up, taking charge as he orders the guards to follow Ryo through town and trap him from all sides. Refusing to allow Alfred take charge, Charles is silenced when Alfred states that Charles stands no chance chasing Ryo down alone, watching as Vanessa takes over with ordering the guards around all, whilst Alfred himself pursues Ryo. Off to the side, Rice grows more excited, curious as to how much Ryo has grown, but more importantly who Ryo's spirit is. Running on top of various houses, Ryo continues to carry Celia carefully, speeding up every so often hoping to lose the Griffin guards chasing him. Impressed that Ryo has matured so much, Celia hears that Ryo will be transferring her over to a friend, both leaping down into an alley. Calling out Aisha, Ryo hands Celia over to Aisha, promising to meet back up once Aisha and Celia have escaped town as Ryo plans to act as decoy. Leaping back onto the roofs, Ryo continues to draw the air units away, but the guards realize Celia is no longer with Ryo, sending a flare to notify the ground units to check on the alleys Ryo recently hid in. Sensing magic from behind, Ryo speeds up to avoid any magic attacks, leaping from roof to roof only to confront the ground unit. Dispatching a group, Ryo is forced to fend off the endless swarm of guards, annoyed that he can't slay anyone, only to realize Alfred is finally caught up. In an instant, Alfred dashes towards Ryo, forcing Ryo to block Alfred's blade. Going on the defense, Ryo evades Alfred's slashes, sensing something strange with Alfred's enchanted blade. Spotting Alfred cocking back his blade, Ryo takes a stance, parrying Alfred's devastating slash, returning the favor as Ryo fires off a volley of slashes of his own. Having matched Alfred's speed and strength, Ryo reads a thrust from Alfred's blade, countering with an elbow to Alfred's skull, but Alfred manages to barely block it. Confused as to why Ryo is not fighting to kill him, Alfred unleashes the true power of his enchanted blade, bringing his blade down onto Ryo, only to incinerate the ground before him. As the guards confirm that no traces of Ryo remain, Alfred suspects that Ryo must have fled during the impact of the attack, ordering his men to continue searching. Outside the city, Celia and Aisha await Ryo's return, relieved to see when Ryo flies in, only scratched up from his battles. Thanking Ryo, Celia is still in shock seeing as Ryo truly has saved her from the horrid future that awaited her, promising to chat with Ryo, hoping to learn everything that has changed since they last spoke. Just then, Aisha detects something nearby, watching as several lightning strikes appear in the surroundings, revealing me briefly and Aisha. The season ends with Aisha asking for Ryo to save some mysterious people, promising to protect Celia as Ryo departs. Picking up from the previous season, we flash back to the moment when Ryo had confessed to Maharu, noting a younger girl watching everything transpire. Several years later, Ryo had managed to attend in Naba's entrance ceremony, a high school Ryo knew Maharu would also be attending. Having worked hard to make it back to his hometown, Maharu reveals he has a part-time job, but more importantly Ryo spots an older-looking Maharu. Out of nowhere, Takahisa appears, greeting Maharu like pals, but before Takahisa can pull anything, Satsuki butts in, reminding Takahisa he already has her. As the three head off, Ryo is relieved, cutting over to Masato and Aki, who have been waiting for the trio. Running towards Satsuki, Aki and Masato compliment their senpai's beauty, flustering her as Satsuki celebrates Maharu and Takahisa entering high school, whilst Aki has entered middle school and Masato 6th grade. At that moment, a strange magic circle consumes everyone, teleporting everyone away as we cut to the present where several mysterious lightning strikes catch Ryo's attention. With Aisha begging Ryo to help the mysterious lights, we follow Maharu, Aki, and Masato all stranded in a field, realizing that their phones have no service. Out of nowhere, a mysterious man appears. But before Ryo can reach their destination, the mysterious man seems to have used spatial magic to kidnap the trio. Spotting a smartphone left behind, we cut to later that evening where the mysterious man has returned to his campsite, tossing Aki and Masato into a carriage filled with captured children, all whilst the leader of the pack drags Maharu elsewhere. As the trio beg for their lives, the men get annoyed seeing as the trio aren't speaking their language, ultimately forcing Aki and Masato to accept their fates. Elsewhere, Ryo has managed to track down the men's campsite, slowly approaching as the men rush to conceal the kidnapped children. Taking out the smartphone, Ryo asks if the men knows anyone who the phone may belong to, but the men admit they've never seen the phone before. Seeing as he's outnumbered, Ryo chooses to leave, but stops suddenly hearing Japanese cries from the carriage. Demanding to know who the cries are coming from, the leader refuses to answer, ordering his men to silence Ryo. Seeing the men get into formation, Ryo chooses to take the fight seriously, leaping into the air to fire off a magic projectile. But one of the men easily slash and destroy the magic. Forced to evade magic pellets, Ryo makes use of his enhanced movements to buy some time, reasoning he should capture the leader in order to force a negotiation. Unveiling his daggers, Ryo begins carving through the men, spotting a caster firing off a massive fireball, forced to tank it. Appearing from the smoke, Ryo tosses his daggers, closing the distance only to dispatch and make his way to the leader. Having dirted his gloves, Ryo burns up his bloody glove, ordering the leader to release the captured children. Without a moment's hesitation, the leader orders for everyone to be released, surprising Masato and Aki as they realize Ryo speaks Japanese as well. Heading over to where Maharu is locked up, Ryo is baffled to see Maharu present, heading off as he telepathically asks for Aisha to meet up with him. With the trio stopping to admire the sunset, Maharu introduces herself to Ryo, asking for Ryo's name. But Ryo hesitantly reveals his Japanese name is Haruto, catching Maharu and Aki off guard. Aki is revealed to be Haruto's younger sister by 3 years, but Aki apologizes for having mistaken Ryo for someone else. Speaking up, Masato Sendo introduces himself as Aki's younger brother, something Ryo didn't know, believing that his past life mother must have remarried. Seeing as it's getting late, the gang head off to find a campsite, all amazed to see Ryo retrieve his portable home. Before the gang can head inside, Aisha arrives carrying Celia, happy to see Ryo had saved the people he was looking for. When Ryo tries to introduce Celia to everyone, he mentions how Maharu and the others don't speak Australian, prompting Aisha to kiss Celia and Maharu on the forehead, forming a bond between the two. Heading into their home for the night, everyone is amazed by how spacious the portable house is, all excited to learn there is also a bath. Later that night, the girls freshen up, all whilst Maharu learns about Ryo and Aisha's spirit bond, impressed that the bond Aisha created for Maharu and Celia is allowing them to communicate. In the kitchen, Masato is grateful Ryo saved them, fearing they would have had to become slaves if he didn't. Having finished up their bath, the girls tell Ryo he is free to use the bath next, surprising Ryo as he spots Celia wearing sweats lent to her by Aki. Seeing as they'll need more clothes, Ryo suggests they visit Amanda tomorrow, reassuring everyone he'll cover all the expenses. Having wrapped up dinner, Ryo hears the trio had most likely been summoned to this world, different to himself as Ryo was reincarnated. With the trio learning that Ryo had lost his life in a traffic accident while he was in university, they wonder if they can return home. Joining the conversation, Celia reasons that the 6 beams of light they saw must have reflected the events of year 1000 of the Holy Era and the legend of the 6 wise gods. Having thought so too, Ryo reveals that a legend states that 1,000 years after the Divine Demon War, 6 sacred stones representing 6 heroes will appear. Ryo is shocked people he recognizes were chosen as heroes, but Maharu is more worried about the others. wondering if Rio could rescue them as well. At that moment, Aisha voices how tired she is, suddenly collapsing onto Rio's chest, shocking everyone. Seeing Celia so flustered, Rio reassures Celia this is normal. But Celia is more stressed seeing as Rio hasn't showered yet. Calming everyone down, Rio explains that Aisha is his spirit bond, so Aisha draws energy from him, but Celia is still jealous they are so close to each other. Seeing Celia complaining, Aisha teleports beside Miharu, revealing that Miharu herself has lots of magical energy and can help replenish Aisha's magic batter as well. With Rio giving Miharu and Aisha a room, Aki and Masato a room, Rio guides Celia to her own room, heading off to his own room as he begins thinking about his past life. Rio wonders if he should reveal he was Haruto in his past life, but seeing as Haruto has already passed away, Rio states that he will only act as Rio should. Suddenly, Rio hears Celia outside his door, asking for a quick chat, both sitting down for some tea like the old days. Celia gets right to business, asking about what Haruto's been up to, who Aisha truly is, and what happened in Rio's past life. Happy to explain everything, Rio starts by revealing that he has lived a completely different life in a world where Miharu and the others came from. When Celia first met Rio had already gained the memories of Haruto, hence he used the alias of Haruto when writing letters to Celia. Celia is surprised to hear Haruto passed away at 20 years old, but the current Rio in front of her is only 16. Celia is grateful for Rio rescuing her, but Celia wants to reassure her father she is okay. Therefore, tomorrow they'll write a letter to Celia's father using an alias. That same night, we cut to Charles holding back his anger, reassuring Rice that he had heard Alfred had eradicated the kidnapper's presence, but Charles admits they still haven't found Celia. Charles mentions how they've shut down the borders and started searching for Celia, but Rice knows that Rio, along with his spirit, must be concealing their presence and hiding somewhere. Changing topics, Charles states that he's surprised that the prophecy of heroes descending on their world has truly happened, telling Rice that they've managed to capture some of the heroes hoping they serve the Beltrum Kingdom. When Rice mentions Beltrum housing a sacred stone, Charles states that the stone is currently with Princess Flora and Duke Huguenot. Rice also brings up attendees from the Galar Kingdom, Lieselot Krisha, and the Rika Merchants Guild, fearing they'll be just as powerful a faction as Huguenots. Elsewhere, we see the House of Rodania serving one of the heroes a hearty meal, all complimenting the hero as he stuffs his face. Flashing back, the hero seems to have been enjoying his days reading web novels, but was suddenly transported in front of Princess Flora and Gustav. When Flora asks if the hero's weapon is a sign, he is one of the 6 great heroes. Sakata Hiroaki stands up confidently gripping his katana, only to cry out that he is indeed a hero. Having finished eating, Hiroaki arrogantly demands to be returned to his home, having been transported here using a mysterious stone. Luckily, Gustav asks Ryoki to calm down, promising to explain everything. The next day, Rio and the gang head out of their portable house, excited for some shopping. Rio asks that Aki and Masato take care of the place while they're gone, stating that there is a concealment spell on their home, so they shouldn't leave its safety. With Aisha leaping off with Celia, Rio picks up Miharu, flying after Aisha only to be surprised seeing Miharu so calm. Taking the chance to learn more about Aisha, Celia is saddened to hear that Aisha has access to all of Rio's memories, wondering how she can get close to Rio. Aisha reveals it was thanks to Celia that Rio has opened up to others, being the first person that showed Rio kindness when he first came to this world. Arriving just outside of Amanda, Rio says they'll refer to Celia as Cecilia only to change his hair color, handing the girls similar items to do the same thing. Walking through the streets, the girls are immediately drawn to various stores, stopping when Miharu spots a store serving sweets similar to their home world. Heading to the Rika Guild, Rio leaves the girls with Chloe, one of the store's employees, stating he'll return in an hour, and Aisha is to help Miharu translate. Excited to shop, Celia takes the lead, trying out a variation of clothes, even testing out clothing mages normally wear. Up next, Miharu shyly tries on some clothes for herself, all whilst Rio heads around town gathering information. Returning to the stores, Rio accidentally spots Maharu picking out some bras. Before Rio can leave, Maharu hands Rio a suit she picked out herself, impressing the girls as Rio decides to order another pair of suits. Cutting to the Beltram guest house, Lieselot is saddened to hear the borders have been closed, asked by her maid to stop thinking about work and enjoy life a bit. Lieselot celebrates Duke Arbor's family being crushed, but asks how Arya feels about Celia, having been acquainted with her in the past. Arya suspects that there is a greater mastermind controlling everything, but Lieselot is more curious if some heroes were summoned to their kingdom of Galark as well. Heading back to their home, Rio shows off the clothes the girls bought for Aki and Masato. Happy to see the two are grateful for the gifts. Unfortunately, Rio couldn't find any information on Satsuki nor Takahisa, believing they too must be heroes summoned to this world as well. With Aki fired up to search for her big brother, Rio reminds everyone that they must also learn this world's language and customs, seeing as Aisha gets tired having to translate for everyone. Before they can plan out their next course of actions, Rio states they should have dinner, prompting Maharu and Rio to begin preparing some Japanese food. Aki finds it strange how Maharu is so close to a boy she just met, but Celia is jealous seeing Maharu and Rio so close, but Rio asks if Celia would like to join them. As the next day arrives, Rio prepares to head off, happy to hear the others will continue to study while he's gone. Asking Aisha to take care of everyone, Haruto retrieves a gem from his inventory, suddenly disappearing, shocking everyone. Having teleported back to the Village of Spirits, spotting Latifa, who has been awaiting Rio's return. Looking around, Rio spots the other girls as well, learning that Sarah and the others had rushed here to see Rio as well. Asking to speak to the elders, Rio learns that the elders had sensed a surge of OD and mana recently, something Rio believes to be space-time magic that summoned the heroes via the 6 beams of light. Sildra asks more about the heroes, shocking everyone when Rio says he's taken in 3 other worlders, but they aren't the heroes. Rio suspects that the 2 associates of these other worlders are the real heroes, as the 3 he's rescued must have accidentally been transported with the 2 heroes. The elders wonder how Rio has been able to speak with the other worlders, intrigued to hear Rio reveal he too was from another world, promising to explain another time. Asking for a favor, Rio asks if he can have the 3 summoned accidentally stay in the village, whilst Rio figures out a way to return them to their home world. The elders mention how they won't be able to help with figuring out the magic that brought the summons to this world, but Rio says it's fine, adding that he also wants his teacher to stay in the village as well. When Rio explains the tragic life Celia had gone through, the elders gladly accept another woman Rio has charmed, hoping that the outsiders will keep their village a secret once everything is over. Seeing as Rio will retrieve the others the next day, we cut to later that night where Rio and Latifa have a chat. Latifa asks if the other worlders are Japanese as well, shocked to hear that Rio had told them he was originally from Japan as well. Seeing Latifa jealous that others know about Rio's secrets, Rio laughs, adoring how innocent Latifa is, but Rio promises to treasure Latifa more. Rio also tells Latifa about his past life crush Maharu and long-distance little sister Aki, revealing that the people summoned here are coincidentally his childhood crush and little sister. But Rio wants to keep such a fact a secret. Curious, Latifa accuses Rio of wanting to tell them, but Rio says his old life of Haruto is in the past and that he wants Latifa to keep the secret with him. Seeing Rio as charming as ever, the two embrace. Cutting to the next day, where Rio apologizes since he needs to leave again. With Rio promising to return in 2 weeks' time, Rio flies off, cutting to the capital of Beltram, Beltrant. Lieselot is seen making her report to King Francois, grateful for the information, but asks if Lieselot can get in contact with Duke Huguenot. Francois mentions how the Huguenot family is in possession of a sacred stone that summoned the heroes, hoping to invite and meet the heroes themselves, having heard the hero to be a young man by the name of Sakata Hiroaki. Hearing that name, Lieselot wonders why it sounds so familiar, but brushes it off, hearing that the hero summoned to their own kingdom goes by the name of Sumareji Satsuki. Lieselot deduces that the heroes must all be from the same world, asking to meet Satsuki, prompting Charlotte, Francois' daughter, to introduce Lieselot to the hero Satsuki. That night, strange revenants gather in a forest near Amanda, commanded by Rice to hunt for people with huge sources of magic, slaying anything that gets in their way. With Rice giving his minions until sundown the next day, we cut to Celia giving Masato private lessons, frustrating Masato as he struggles to learn basic phrases. As Aishia sleeps through the day, we see Maharu and Aki cooking, getting Maharu excited to see when Rio will return. Aki calls out Maharu for acting strange, reminding Maharu that their school life had completely been wiped away along with their relationships and friendships they had in their original world. Seeing Aki stressed out about the sudden change, Maharu apologizes for acting so nonchalant, but reminds Aki that stressing will do them no good, especially since Rio is doing the best he can for them already. Aki takes the chance to ask Maharu about Rio, curious as to why Maharu is so comfortable with Rio, even though she normally hates most boys. Maharu admits that Rio is quite dependable, plus Rio's former identity is Haruto, the name of Maharu's childhood friend and Aki's former big brother, but Aki gets triggered, annoyed to think about the Haruto that abandoned her. Before Maharu can apologize, Aki storms off, sitting outside only to wonder if Maharu truly still loves Haruto, but suddenly Rice minions stumble onto Rio's portable home. With Aishia suddenly waking up, we see Maharu has gone outside to check on Aki, both suddenly spotting strange creatures breach Rio's barrier. As the creatures dash towards the girls, Aishia suddenly appears, blowing the creatures back. Hearing loud explosions, Celia orders Masato to remain inside, heading out to check out what is happening. Having knocked down one of the creatures, Aishia is forced to turn her attention to another one sneaking up, unable to catch a third that pounces onto the girls. Luckily, Celia arrives, blasting away and protecting the girls. Now able to focus on the fight, the monster prepares to attack Aishia, but Rio appears, knocking back the monsters. Confirming that everyone is okay, Rio asks Aishia about the creatures, reasoning the darker-toned monster to be its leader. With Aishia focusing on the two gray monsters, Rio corners the leader, analyzing the creature's attack patterns, only to immobilize it. Seeing that the creature is unable to speak, Rio punctures the creature from behind, shocked to see the creature utter some words, but eventually the monster perishes, leaving behind a gem. As Aishia cleans up the other two monsters, allowing Rio to check up on the girls, wondering if the monster had asked to end its life with its final breath. Heading inside, Aki apologizes for leaving the safety of the home, making up with Maharu, who both head to finish making lunch, but Rio announces they'll be moving. That evening, Rice notices that one of his revenant groups have yet to return, but states he'll simply make more minions with the new bodies he's acquired. The next day, Rio finally teleports everyone with him to the Spirit Village, immediately greeted by Latifa and the others who bow their heads seeing Aishia once more. Celia takes the chance to introduce herself to Latifa, having heard that Rio considers Latifa as family. But Celia gets distracted by Latifa's furry tail, taking the chance to snuggle with it. Hearing Latifa suddenly speaking Japanese, the others wonder who Latifa is, shocked to hear Latifa reveal that she once lived in Japan, offering to help teach the trio about their current world. Rio asks if Latifa is okay with revealing such a fact, but Latifa says she'll help Rio shoulder any burden, prompting everyone to introduce themselves, but Latifa is more focused on Maharu. With Sarah guiding everyone through the village, Rio's party spots various beast people hiding from them, wondering if they are scaring everyone away. Rio mentions how beast people are always scared of humans, but suddenly a beast child runs over to Maharu, whispering something to Latifa. Latifa mentions how the child loves Maharu's school uniform, finding it cute as Maharu compliments the child's adorable ears. With the tension broken, the village begin conversing with everyone, giving Latifa the chance to ask if she can treat Maharu like a big sister, something Maharu is more than happy to accept. That evening, the village holds a welcome party, having everyone stand in front of the spirit altar. The elders thank everyone for coming, amazed to see the otherworlders behave and act just like humans. But just then Dryas appears, happy to see there are some new faces. As the village parties hard throughout the night, Rio's party are immediately integrated into the village, but Dryas notes how the Otherworlders have an interesting amount of OD surging within them. Seeing Aki and Masato interested in some inarizushi at the party, Latifah reveals it was herself who cooked them. Suddenly turning to see Rio is as popular as ever. Aki is happy to see Latifah is proud of her big brother, wondering where her own brother is, but promises to work hard for the day they can reunite. With the party wrapping up, Rio says everyone will be living together with Latifah and the girls, given a separate part in the tree house, along with telling his party about an open bath. As the girls all rally together to enjoy a lovely bath, Masato is sad he lost a rock, paper, scissors to Aki and allowed the girls to bathe first, taking out his revenge on Rio. At the same time, Maharu and Aki gaze out into the night sky, wondering if they'll ever be able to go home, something that catches the attention of Latifah and Celia. Masato asks why Rio is so strong, inspired to hear that Rio is strong to achieve his goal and protect his loved ones, promising to also grow strong so Masato can protect Aki and Maharu. As the girls wrap up, we see Celia head to her room, staring at a letter on her desk. The next morning, Celia goes for a stroll, amazed to see Rio is training as hard as ever. Rio is glad to see Celia and the others are integrating into the village fine, apologizing as Rio can now focus on getting Celia's letter to her father. Celia gets worried Rio is overworking himself, asking if she can help with Rio's end goal as she feels she is getting in Rio's way, but Rio reassures Celia that saving her was something he did for himself. Rio says that after he helps Celia deliver her letter, he plans on heading over to Rodania to gather more information on the heroes, pleasing Celia as she says Rio can rely on her anytime he wants, reminding Rio that she is the greatest mage in all of the Beltram Kingdom. That evening, Rio, Celia, and Aishia prepare to head off, wished a safe trip by the others who've gathered to see them off. Maharu takes the chance to present Rio with a bento she made for him, something Rio is grateful for, all whilst Alma and Orphea tease Maharu for acting like Rio's wife. As the trio fly off, Latifah asks everyone to work hard to surprise Rio when he returns, cutting over to Rodania, where Liselot has formally invited Hiroaki, Flora, Gustav, and Rona to her father's upcoming gathering. Seeing as Hiroaki is the hero, the others ask what Hiroaki thinks about the invitation, but Hiroaki is too busy admiring Liselot's voice and beauty. As Flora wakes Hiroaki from his daydream, Hiroaki decides they'll all be going, hoping to spend more time with Liselot at the party. That night, Rio has finally reached Clea, the piece of land where Celia's father resides. Pointing out her childhood home, Celia reveals there is a secret passage in the garden that leads into the main house only her family knows about, all flying into the garden as they hide away from some guards. Seeing the place heavily guarded, Rio uses his spirit arts to cast an invisibility spell, sneaking past the guards only to help Celia remove some flooring concealing the hidden entrance. Having made it underground, Celia guides everyone through a tunnel, but Celia's father Roland immediately detects someone has entered their family's hidden passage. Swiftly taking out the letter, Celia quickly places the letter on a table, forced to leave as she barely gets a chance to hear her father's voice once more. With the trio taking a breather outside, Roland is seen reading over the letter, but upon realizing it was Celia who wrote it, Roland rushes outside, crying for Celia to reveal herself. Roland says he'll always be proud of his baby girl, wishing for the day they reunite, something Celia feels as well as she promises to reunite with her father soon. Sometime later, we see Liselot riding an aircraft to Amanda, suddenly forced to pull an emergency landing as Liselot is notified of a black dragon approaching them. Crash landing in Nor, Duke Krisha's territory within the Galar Kingdom, Liselot is grateful to her captain for valuing their lives and allowing the black dragon to pass. Choosing to make a quick stop, Liselot and her party are greeted by Baronet Boxa, but suddenly hears Hiroaki and the Huguenot faction have arrived as well, reporting that the Beltram hero has also been invited to her father's gathering. Liselot wonders why Hiroaki and the others are here, learning Gustav has business in Galark and Hiroaki wants to stop by Amanda. Seeing as the black dragon is still circling nearby, Boxa offers his home for everyone to stay at, cutting to later that evening where Rio has made it to Rodania, amazed that Marquis Ron has so much land even after being banished from the royal capital. Celia suddenly realizes Aishia has disappeared, suddenly spotting Aishia stuffing her face with some skewers, apologizing as Rio rushes to pay for the food. Luckily, the store owner says a drunken man has already offered to pay, having helped to repair the ship of a hero. Surprised to hear a hero being mentioned, Rio asks to know more. Hearing that the heroes that have been summoned have been invited to a gathering party, and that the princess and her party are set to leave today. That night, we see Lieselot and the others have all gathered at Box's home, all fearing that the Black Dragon will force an evacuation of the Norse townspeople. But Lieselot wants to know what the others think. Hiroaki takes the chance to ask what Lieselot is planning. Shocked to hear that due to the Black Dragon roaming the air, Lieselot and her party are planning to travel by land to Amanda. Fearing that Lieselot's party will run into danger, Hiroaki offers to escort them, but Rona advises against it. Gustav says Hiroaki is allowed to do as he pleases, but Lieselot fears that another kingdom's hero will be sacrificing valuable time for them, something Hiroaki brushes off as a hero's duty. Gustav promises to not hold Lieselot and her party accountable if something horrible occurs, something Flora agrees with as it would be better than leaving Hiroaki in the village in case the dragon attacks. Seeing Lieselot still worried, Hiroaki unveils his divine arms katana, Yamata no Orochi, something that convinces Lieselot to allow Hiroki to tag along. The next day, Lieselot and Arya make final preparations to depart, suddenly running into Raymond Brandt, Gustav's night captain. Seeing as Raymond recognizes Arya, Lieselot asks how they know each other, learning that Arya came from a ruined family and was taken in by Lieselot after a tragic incident. With Gustav and his men arriving as well, they all set out by carriage, giving Hiroaki, Rona, Flora, and Lieselot their own carriage. Lieselot takes the chance to get to know Flora more, but out of nowhere Arya announces that they've been surrounded by monsters, swiftly reinforcing the carriages. Arya wonders how so many monsters appeared out of nowhere, ordering the knights to get into formation. With a rally of goblins pelting everyone with stones, everyone begins erecting barriers, all whilst Raymond asks that Gustav remain in the carriage. Seeing as Arya is focused on defense, Raymond suddenly spots hundreds of monsters rushing their carriage, but this forces Arya to change strategies. Ordering Lieselot to remain inside, Arya states she'll lead their counterattack, asking the knights to keep defending and her other maids to follow her. Starting with a fireball, Arya blows an opening in the enemy swarm, equipping her blade only to begin carving through the enemy lines. Amazed by Arya's movements, the other maids physically enhance their bodies, fighting back against the swarm as well, all whilst Rice hovers across the battlefield, excited to exploit his foe's weaknesses. Back in the carriage, Hiroaki begins to get annoyed, unable to see what is transpiring outside, but Lieselot reassures Hiroaki that her maids will handle everything. Still not convinced, Hiroaki wonders how he can trust people he just met, but this annoys Lieselot as she reassures Flora everything will be fine. Jealous, Hiroaki and Rona flirt a bit, but suddenly hearing something massive fall onto their carriage. Hiroaki can't wait any longer, kicking down the carriage door only to drag Rona out with him. Knowing they must follow after Hiroaki, Lieselot advises Flora to stay close, erecting her own barrier only to head outside. Lieselot is surprised by the number of monsters, but manages to make it to where Hiroaki is only to order Hiroaki to stay calm, seeing as everything is under control. Hiroaki begins to shake, having never experienced battle before, but Lieselot says she'll be leaving Flora with them, heading off to heal some of the wounded. Reporting to Lieselot, Arya says the rear guard and the sides are slowly losing, but the front seems to be fine thanks to Arya's hard work. With Arya heading to help reinforce the rear guard, Rice takes the chance to spice up the battle, all whilst Arya continues to impress Raymond, seeing her flawlessly dance throughout the battlefield. Before Arya can send Raymond and his men elsewhere, a massive roar can be heard, forcing everyone to turn their heads towards a powerful-looking minotaur. Rana cries that a minotaur is a legendary monster found during the Divine Demon War era. Shocked to see such a beast present, but out of nowhere another minotaur appears in front of the carriage, walking towards the princess. With Arya occupied by some monsters and one of the minotaurs, Hiroaki becomes speechless seeing the massive creature approach them, locking eyes onto Flora. Having easily knocked aside a carriage, the minotaur cleaves its weapon towards Flora, but Lieselot tackles Flora to evade the blow. Roaring once more, the minotaur prepares to take out both girls at once, but suddenly Rio appears, severing the minotaur's sword-wielding arm. Using its own weapon, Rio skewers the minotaur, only to offer to help the girls out. Seeing the white-haired man, Flora can't help but be reminded of Rio. But seeing the other minotaur rushing them, Rio enchants his blade, meeting the monster's power. In an instant, Rio knocks back and slays the minotaur, detecting another minotaur approaching from behind, but easily evading Rio dices up the final minotaur. As everyone celebrates a successful defense, Arya is seen finishing off her own minotaur, all whilst Rio greets everyone, surprised to see Flora amongst them. Grateful for saving them, Lieselot officially introduces herself and the others, all whilst Rios uses the alias of Haruto, all wondering why Flora seems so infatuated. Flora asks if she's met Rio before, but Rio lies, stating he is simply a traveling swordsman, intriguing Gustav to have never heard of such a powerful man before. Having recognized Rio, Chol greets Rio, revealing that she had served Rio at Amanda when Rio was shopping for clothes. At the same time, Hiroaki arrogantly introduces himself as the hero, prompting Rio to bow, having been glad to be in the presence of a hero. With nothing more to say, Hiroaki orders for everyone to prepare to move out, but Flora takes a final glance at Rio, making Rio wonder if Flora has figured out who he is. Seeing as he should get acquainted with such a powerful person like Lieselot, Rio offers to help fix one of the broken carriages, spotting Arya, one of Celia's past acquaintances. Apparently, Rio just so happened to be flying above the battlefield, but upon seeing the Minotaurs appear, Rio had left Aishia to take care of Celia all whilst he intervened. As Rio cuts open the broken carriage, Lieselot mentions how Rio's powerful sword must be an artifact with wind magic, but Rio knows his spirit arts is what makes him so powerful. Off to the side, Cosette asks Chloe to introduce Rio to her, but Natalie asks that the girls not fight over such a brilliant man like Rio. As the maids serve everyone some beverages, Cosette personally delivers Rio his drink, introducing herself only to swiftly leave. Impressed by Cosette's fancy tone, everyone finally prepares to move out, only to realize one of the Minotaur's swords are blocking their path. Seeing as it's his time to shine, Hiroaki demonstrates his raw strength, easily picking up and tossing the blade aside, only to smirk at Rio, something Rio finds adorable. Inside one of the carriages, Rio wonders if he should be sitting with everyone, fearing he shouldn't be so close to such royalty. Gustav reassures Rio this is the bare minimum to thank Rio. Plus, Lieselot plans to reward Rio once they return to Amanda. Following Latifa, she is proud to see Masato, Aki, and Maharu Stralian are getting better, all thanks to Latifa's teaching, of course. Seeing the Beast People wanting to play with Masato, Latifa mentions how they should all be practicing their spirit arts as well, cutting to later that day where Orphea is teaching them how to manipulate water. Sadly, the girls still aren't that great at it, but Aki gets jealous seeing how talented Maharu is, leaving to go on a walk alone. Walking by the spirit altar, Aki spots some beast children playing, reminded of a memory where Rio, Maharu, and Aki are all playing together. Aki had asked to play forever with Rio, but one day Rio was forced to leave, angering Aki as she blamed Rio for lying and leaving her. Having been lost in the past, Aki suddenly hears Latifa call out to her, heading home as they get ready for dinner. Aki wonders where Masato is, happy to see that Masato is so used to his new life, but wonders how Latifa and Rio behaved when they first came to the village. Sarah and the others embarrassingly admit that they had attacked Rio when they first met, but after clearing up some misunderstandings, they've been nothing but kind to Rio and Latifa. Orphea does mention how she once heard Rio cry in his dreams, revealing that Rio had uttered the name Me, something that triggers Maharu and Aki. At that moment, Masato returns with a massive fish, accidentally letting it loose, but the gang eventually wrap up dinner, all heading to bed. That night, Maharu practices her spirit arts, suddenly hearing a knock at the door only to greet Sarah and the others. The girls ask to talk about Aki, cutting over to Latifa and Aki as they enjoy a bath. But Aki asks what Latifa's life was before she met Rio. Shocked to hear Latifa was once a slave. Latifa says it's fine since Rio had rescued her and given her a second chance at life. Something Aki resonates with as Aki was betrayed, but was given a second chance when her mother remarried, meeting her new older brother Takahisa and younger brother Masato. Seeing Aki divulging all her worries, Latifa praises Aki for thinking so far ahead and caring about others, offering to lend Aki an ear whenever she needs. The next few days, Aki wakes up early to put more effort into her training, but the girls get worried seeing Aki change. Having borrowed Maharu's uniform, Orphea shows Aki her new fit, all whilst Maharu bakes an apple pie, Aki's favorite dessert. As the girls enjoy the delectable treat, Aki allows Latifa to borrow her uniform, all excited to show Rio their new uniform and everything they've learned once Rio returns. Cutting over to the Proxia Empire, Nidgard, Emperor Nidal Proxia chats with Lucius, both itching for a war. Lucius mentions how Duke Arbor seems quite vulnerable at the moment, learning that Nidal had already sent one of his ambassadors to capitalize on such a thing. At that moment, Rice is revealed to be the mole placed by Nidal, suddenly appearing only to ask for Lucius's help. Rice says Nidal can rest easy, as Rice needs help with kidnapping Princess Flora. Finally arriving at Amanda, Lieselot says she'll speak with Rio tomorrow, leaving Arya to guide Rio to his lodge. Shortly after, Rio heads out to meet up with Celia and Aishia, both glad to see Rio isn't hurt. Rio mentions how they'll be staying in town for a few days since Lieselot has provided them a room, but Celia worries Arya will recognize her, something Rio says will be okay since Celia has a disguise on. Rio also mentions how other royals were with Lieselot, these being Flora and Rana, people Rio attended school with, but even they couldn't see past Rio's disguise. Rio says the main goal of staying in town is to get closer to Lieselot. That way finding the heroes summoned to her land will be easier. But Celia warns Rio that Lieselot is a very capable woman. With Celia promising to teach Rio the proper etiquette, we cut to later that night where Gustav praises Arya for her great work fighting off the minotaurs and monsters, but Lieselot wonders why Hiroaki didn't contribute as much. Gustav reveals Hiroaki is still inexperienced, but Gustav knows with time, Hiroaki, along with his divine arms, will make a deadly combination. Lieselot wonders what Hiroaki is lacking, learning that Gustav has been having Hiroaki train with some knights. Unfortunate that Hiroaki wasn't able to show off his hard work during his official battle. Hearing all of this, Lieselot deduces that Gustav has other plans for Hiroaki, but the conversation changes to Rio, both curious as to who the unknown swordsman that slayed the Minotaurs truly is. Lieselot is also baffled but suspects Rio must be hiding his identity due to having ties with a fallen royal family, something Gustav agrees with, prompting Lieselot to ask Gustav to join in on her chat with Rio tomorrow. Happy to see Lieselot is quite open, Gustav offers up his men to help search for the reason more monsters are appearing in the nearby forest, having received reports of adventures suddenly disappearing. At the same time, we see Stuart and Alphonse taking their dates to an expensive restaurant, but Alphonse points out how annoying it is for them to be saved by a mysterious swordsman, along with Hiroaki teasing the two for hiding in the back when the monsters attacked. Just wanting to enjoy their night, the boys make their way to the receptionist of the restaurant, pissed to learn that their premium room is currently booked, offering to pay triple to have the room vacant. Cutting to the premium room, we see Celia telling Rio clumsy tales about Aishia, only to hear some noise outside the room. As Rio goes to check on the commotion, he's suddenly greeted by the receptionist who apologizes for disturbing their meal, prompting Stuart and Alphonse to introduce themselves. Remembering the boys as bullies from school, Rio chooses not to agitate them, handing over the room as Rio and his party have finished eating, but before Celia and Aishia can leave, Alphonse asks the girls to join them. Stepping up, Rio states that they'll be leaving, but Alphonse doesn't budge, reminding Rio that he is speaking to nobles. Rio fires back by stating laws prevent nobles from abusing their status, but this pisses Alphonse off as he throws several punches at Rio. Easily evading them, Rio pins Alphonse to the ground, ordered by Stewart to release Alphonse. When Stewart joins the brawl, Rio is forced to use martial arts to knock both boys out, ending the brawl without too much of a disturbance. Receiving reports of the brawl, Lieselot is annoyed that nobles still exist in the world, but Gustav is furious seeing as his own men are putting on such dishonorable displays. Lieselot says she'll personally apologize to Rio tomorrow, but before Gustav leaves, he says he'll handle the punishment dealt to the boys. Meeting up with Alphonse and Stewart, Gustav is pissed, reminding Stewart that he wouldn't get second chances, therefore they'll be disinherited, something Alphonse thinks is going too far. Gustav reminds Alphonse that Rio was able to handle 3 minotaurs at once, something Alphonse says he can replicate with an enchanted sword, but Gustav says he heard Rio took down both boys, something the boys don't refute. Not wanting to punish such arrogant brats, Gustav says he wants the boys to join Lieselot's investigation into the West Forest, stating that if the boys produce results, they'll be forgiven, but if they fail, they'll be confined away. With the boys accepting, Gustav orders the boys to first apologize to Rio, cutting to the next day, where Rio enjoys breakfast with the girls. Rio apologizes for worrying Celia, reminding Celia they can leave whenever, but at that moment Lieselot arrives, inviting the three to have a chat. Lieselot introduces herself to the girls, asking to speak privately to Rio only to apologize for the brawl last night. Rio says it's fine since no one was hurt, but asks that the event be written up just in case. Happy to oblige, Lieselot and Rio head over to meet with Gustav, happy to have Gustav sign off on the brawl as well. Seeing as this is the perfect time, Gustav has his boys apologize to Rio, only for everyone to meet up with Flora and Hiroaki. Sitting down for a meal, Hiroaki is amazed by the quality of meals served by Lieselot's family, surprised to hear Lieselot mention infusing rice with cheese to make a cheese risotto. As everyone enjoys the meal, Rio wonders who Lieselot is to have knowledge from Earth, but the gang take the chance to know more about Rio. Rio mentions how he started traveling alone at 11, shocking everyone to hear his parents passed away when he was young, so Rio had been traveling alone for a while. Rio chooses to mention he has no permanent residence at the moment, offered a place to stay by Gustav and Lieselot, but this makes Hiroaki a little jealous. Rio reassures Hiroaki that a hero is far superior than a commoner like himself, pleasing Hiroaki, but Rio takes the chance to ask about Galark's lady hero. Hearing the name Satsuki, Rio confirms he's found one of Maharu's friends, but Lieselot mentions Sir Shigekura Rue, the hero of Beltrum, will also be invited. Gustav also says the hero of the Senestella Kingdom may also be present, intriguing Rio as he is one step closer to his goals. Cutting to Alphonse, we see him curse Gustav for having him run basic hunting errands, suddenly ordered to stay alert as Lucius appears from the forest. Following Maharu, she's seen training her spirit arts, dreaming of the day Rio returns, shaking off the thought that Rio could be Haruto from her childhood. Focusing, Maharu manages to create some water in a cup, amazing the girls as Maharu is constantly working hard. Maharu says she simply wants to be competent and not worry Rio too much, something the girls find adorable. The girls mentions how Aishia and Maharu are still connected, meaning Maharu has greater potential than normal, but at the same time Aishia seems to be dazing off, only to be offered some tea by Celia. Pleased to see Celia and Rio's tea are the same. Aishia suddenly gets distracted once more, cutting over to Lucius. He and Reese both greet Alphonse and the knights. Lucius reasons that the knights before him must be the elite guards protecting Flora, but the knights seem to be 20 in numbers but all quite young. Rice wonders if Lucius recognizes any of the knights, seeing as Lucius was once a noble in the Beltrum Kingdom, but Lucius could care less seeing as they need all the knights' bodies for Rice's dolls. Seeing Alphonse draw his sword, Rice reminds Lucius to not to slay the knights, but Lucius says he needs to at least have some fun, asking Rice to stand guard. Drawing his red blade, Lucius dashes into the crowd of knights, single-handedly knocking each one out all whilst advising them to strengthen their bodies. Seeing an opening, Alphonse knows he'll clear his name if he's able to slay Lucius, rushing in for a sneak attack, but Lucius easily parries. Seeing Alphonse enhance his body, Lucius says he'll deal with Alphonse last, blasting him back only to notice he's been surrounded. As the knights reinforce their bodies, they state that they can slay Lucius and capture Rice, but as the knights rush into attack, Lucius gorgeously dances around the men's advances, picking them off one by one. Seeing everything unfold, Alphonse gets jealous, seeing Lucius wielding an enchanted sword, but realizes Lucius is now cornering the remaining 4 knights. As Rice begins moving the unconscious knights' bodies aside, the 4 knights retreat, but in an instant Lucius blocks their escape path, isolating Alphonse. Preparing to put Alphonse to sleep, Lucius confirms that Alphonse is corrupt based on his eyes, intrigued to hear Alphonse bribing him with some cash, but chooses to put him to sleep. That evening, the gang thanked Rio for stopping by, wishing Rio the best for the rest of his stay, as they'll send Rio a messenger in the future. Flora takes the chance to ask to speak with Rio more privately in the future, making Rio wonder if Flora knows who he is, prompting Hiroaki to mention they'll be staying in town as well. Lieselot asks if they can invite Rio to a tea party, happy to accept as Rio finally takes his leave. Back inside, Hiroaki can't help but notice Flora acting strange, especially ever since Rio has been with them. Flora apologizes since she didn't realize she has been fidgety, but Rona makes up the excuse that Flora is simply trying to scout Rio to be her knight, something that gets Hiroaki to back off. Back with Alphonse, we see his barely conscious body drag through the woods, barely spotting Lucius and Rice, only to spot a swarm of monsters wearing knight uniforms. Scanning the area, Alphonse notices another fellow knight suddenly transform into a monster, all whilst Rice proudly declares he's remade the human spirit and body. Rice wonders why Lucius had left Alphonse conscious, instructed by Lucius to try out the perfect revenant test on him, intriguing Rice. As Lucius binds Alphonse, Rice inserts a red gem into Alphonse's body, watching as Alphonse's transformation begins. That night, Gustav is notified of Alphonse's unit missing, something Gustav knows is the worst-case scenario, wondering who else could help. At the same time, Flora gets ready for bed, thinking back on Haruto and Rio, people that have similar personalities and manners of speech, regretting not thanking Rio the first time he saved her, wondering if he hates her. Having heard of Gustav's unit gone missing, Lieselot offers to send her own unit in search of them. But seeing his knight has fallen, they reason they will start the search the next morning. Gustav wonders what type of monsters still lurk in the forest, especially since they've already slain various minotaurs. But Lieselot fears there may be even greater creatures in the forest. With no other choice, Lieselot declares she'll send Arya along with a select few to ensure the rescue mission is a success. But hearing Gustav ask if they can send Rio as well, Lieselot says Rio is most likely protecting someone in his party and won't be able to help. Racking his brain, Gustav wonders if Lieselot will ask adventurers for help. But Lieselot says the adventurers will remain in town in case an attack is performed on the town itself. Back with Lucius, he stuffs his face after a hard day of work, hearing Rice wonder how their perfect revenant is doing. Lucius first asks Rice to put away his toys, watching as Rice retracts all of his summons, only to hear Alphonse in his revenant form declare he'll slay everyone in his way. Rice states that a perfect revenant is far more aggressive and superior than any normal revenant, but Rice does mention Alphonse will be harder to control. Nonetheless, Lucius gets excited to see what Alphonse is capable of, tossing Alphonse some meat and booze, watching as Alphonse devours everything. The next morning, Mist covers the city, only for Aishia to wake up Rio, declaring that she sensed monsters outside the city walls. Rio learns that Aishia is unable to identify how many along with their locations, but at that moment knights on the west gate spot entities approaching. Rio says they'll head out to scope the area while Celia sleeps, but as the entities approach the gate, the city knights notify the town that they are currently being attacked. With the sun rising, Celia suddenly rushes to Rio, learning that Rio has identified several demons near the castle walls. Quickly getting changed, Rio flies into the sky, spotting the castle gate has been breached and an army of monsters have begun to flood the city. Rio is impressed by Amanda's defenses, watching as the townsfolk are evacuated. At that moment, Aishia notifies Rio that monsters are appearing from the east as well, terrifying the townsfolk as they're forced to head north. Seeing as the eastern gate falling will drive the town into chaos, Rio asks Celia to remain by Aishia's side, flying off towards the eastern gate. Following Chloe, she attempts to hold off the swarm of monsters invading the eastern gate, wanting to buy time for the townsfolk to escape, but seeing as there is no backup, Chloe braces for the onslaught. Luckily, a powerful gust of wind magic shreds the creatures, shocking Chloe as she's relieved to see Rio has appeared. Seeing as he'll be able to defend the eastern gate himself, Rio asks everyone else to protect the plaza, raising his blade only to cut through another wave of monster with a single slash. Cutting over to Lieselot. She gets reports of the eastern gate being attacked as well, stressed out seeing as her main forces have been dispatched to deal with the monsters on the west side. Knowing that the adventurers may not be of use and most of her maids are busy evacuating, Lieselot asks if Natalie can head there, but first Lieselot wants Natalie to make sure Gustav is safe in his manor. As Natalie leaves, Lieselot is relieved to hear Rio is now defending the eastern gate, cutting over to Rice and Lucius, who both seem to have infiltrated the town flawlessly. As Rice makes note of a spirit near the center of town, but Rice states they need to still wait for their forces to draw everyone away and out of town before they can make their move. Back with Rio, he easily dices through the oncoming monsters, amazing Chloe and the knights as they wonder who Rio really is, but Chloe fears that Rio may get tired eventually. Whilst fighting, Rio wonders why the monsters are acting strange, not fully attacking the gates, but seem to be stalling for something, swiftly asking Aishia if she has detected anything. Aishia reports that nothing abnormal has happened and that the western gate has defended successfully, relieving Rio as he now focuses on clearing eastern monsters. As Natalie and Cosette arrive for backup, they're both stunned to see Rio's flawless attacks, calling out to Rio to ask him to rest. Rio is happy to see the girls again, asking to switch places with him, but before he leaves he promises to take down the menacing-looking Minotaur from afar. Charging up a powerful spell, Rio instantly slays the creature from afar, but just to make sure Rio fires off a devastating wind slash, impressing all the girls. Before Cosette can flirt with Rio, Natalie and Chloe hold her back, cutting to Arya, who seems to be conserving her mana, weirded out by how the monsters have yet to fully invade their town. At that moment, all the monsters begin roaring, giving the signal to Rice and Lucius to finally let Alphonse loose. But back with Arya, the demons finally begin sending in their full forces. Taking charge, Arya orders the knights to hold off the revenants, all while she deals with the Minotaur. Having made it back to Celia and Aishia, Rio finally decides to leave, but seeing a revenant hidden in a hood, Rio has no choice but to hastily slay the creature. As more revenants appear, Rio chases after each of them, successfully protecting everyone, but this alerts Chloe to ask what is happening. Chloe is once again grateful to hear Rio protect everyone, but Chloe says she must quickly report to Lieselot that some monsters have made their way into town, asking Rio to escort everyone to the northern gates. Cutting over to Hiroaki, he wonders if sieges on towns are common in this world, hearing from Stuart that villages would normally get destroyed by demons, but not cities. Having helped evacuate everyone to the northern walls, Rio is pulled aside by a city guard, having been told to personally escort and evacuate Rio and his party by Lieselot. Happy to be treated so nicely, Rio and the gang follow the guard. Moving forward to later that evening where Alphonse is guiding Lucius through the mansion and towards the guest living room. Lucius reminds Alphonse to not touch the princess, but allows Alphonse to slay the hero, exciting Alphonse as he declares he's more powerful than a Minotaur. Spotting a guard calling out to them, Lucius says he's a simple adventurer, but not even a few seconds later Alphonse tears through the door of the guest room, forcing everyone to prepare for battle. Spotting the revenants approaching them, Raymond enhances his body, dashing forth, but is intercepted and pinned down by a revenant. With Alphonse sending his revenants to occupy the others, Alphonse suddenly spots Hiroaki drawing his katana, personally stepping up to fight the hero. In the blink of an eye, Alphonse darts up close, only to land a solid punch on Hiroaki's face, knocking him out. Excited by his new strength, Alphonse calls out Gustav, blinking in close only to pummel Gustav. With everyone unable to help Gustav, Alphonse continues to toy with Gustav, but Rona takes the chance to suggest Flora flee whilst everyone is distracted. As the knights manage to cut off the arms of a single revenant, Alphonse and the revenants continue to chuckle, all whilst Rona manages to sneak Flora to the exit. Hearing a voice call out to Flora, Rona trusts the mysterious voice with Flora's life, staying back to stall everyone, whilst the mysterious voice drags Flora away. Outside the mansion, Rio and the girls have been escorted to where Lieselot is located, thanked by Lieselot for all the help, but Rio asks if Lieselot is aware of any demons in the area. Rio points out that he detects monsters inside the mansion where Gustav and the others are, but at the same time Flora demands to know who Lucius is, terrified to hear that Lucius is here to kidnap her. Before Lucius can scare Flora anymore, Rice appears reminding Lucius that a powerful spirit has already detected their presence, prompting Lucius to hoist Flora onto his shoulders, ordering Flora to not move. As Lucius runs off, Rice heads deeper into the mansion, all whilst Rona attempts to stall the revenants with her photon bullets. Alphonse continues to mock Rona's pathetic spells, even evading Raymond's sneak attack, but having just woken up, Hiroaki is pissed Alphonse tricked him. Imbuing himself with enhancements, Hiroaki instantly decapitates one of the revenants, terrifying Alphonse as he keeps Hiroaki distracted whilst his minions attack Rona. Ordering Rona to duck, Hiroaki speeds up, darting towards Rona, only to decapitate the two revenants attacking her. Infuriated, Hiroaki suddenly infuses his blade with water, firing off a powerful slash of water that alerts Rio and the others, having blown a hole in the mansion that overflows with water. Terrified, Alphonse flees the scene, forcing Hiroaki to give chase, but Rice had been waiting outside, knocking Hiroaki out as to not allow him to awaken his powers. Ordering Alphonse to head outside, Rice opens a portal to summon his revenant horde, all pouring out into the room and onto the courtyard. Springing into action, Rio begins dismantling the revenants, but suddenly spots Flora being kidnapped. Before Flora can call out what is happening, Lucius silences her by threatening to cut off her legs, but Rio instantly recognizes Lucius's voice. Seeing the revenants attacking everyone, Rio is forced to watch Lucius run off with Flora, but Aishia gets serious, beginning to fight in place of Rio. Seeing as the maids are also here to help, Aishia and Celia ask that Rio follow his heart. Both showing off they can defend the mansion as Celia stalls the revenants with an earth cage. In an instant, Rio darts after Lucius, leaving Celia to prioritize defense and Aishia offense. With a simple incantation, Celia erects multiple hexagonal barriers, a spell even court mages struggle with. Lieselot wonders if Aishia will be okay, but Celia reassures Lieselot that Aishia is on par with Rio, amazed to see Aishia barrage the enemy with martial arts. Seeing as her attacks aren't strong enough, Aishia borrows a spear, instantly skewering and slicing up the surrounding revenants, only to be surrounded. Having made it outside, Alphonse spots Aishia, calling out to the revenants to attack Celia whilst he personally deals with Aishia. As the revenants cut through Celia's barrier, Celia is forced to trap the revenants in another earth cage. But seeing as one has evaded capture, Aishia is forced to relinquish her spear to save Celia. Unarmed, Aishia goes on the defense, luring Alphonse towards a wall, only to trick him into impaling the mansion wall, stuck in place. Being handed a spear, Aishia pierces Alphonse's heart, only to decapitate him to be safe. At the same time, Rio uses Lucius's magic residue to track him down, following Lucius all the way into a forest only to cut him off. Amazed someone has followed him, Lucius asks to know who Rio is, but Rio has no words, only glaring at the man who murdered his mother. Suddenly following Maharu, she sees a younger Rio spending his early years with his mother, leading up to the day where Lucius slaughtered his mother in front of him. But before Maharu can comfort Rio, she suddenly awakens from her dream. Back with Rio, Lucius demands to know who Rio is, threatening to harm Flora if Rio remains silent. But Ryo states Lucius is the person he's after, not Flora. Surprised, Ryo knows his name. Lucius laughs, hearing Ryo is here to slay him. But Lucius admits he can't remember who Ryo is. Nonetheless, Lucius scolds Ryo for not introducing himself, suddenly flinging his dagger towards Ryo's heart. But Lucius's dagger gets caught by Ryo's coat. Seeing as Ryo is quite strong, Lucius takes out his crimson blade, tossing out a flurry of slashes and even using Flora as a meat shield. Seeing Ryo hesitate to harm Flora, Lucius calls Ryo soft. But at the same time, Celia and Aishia continue to clean up the remaining revenants. Back with Ryo, he's forced to stay on the defense as Lucius lunges at him with his sword that is growing longer suddenly. With no other choice, Ryo leaps back, attacking Lucius's side, only to appear from above, raining projectiles on Lucius. Using the smoke, Ryo attempts to impale Lucius from below, but Lucius manages to kick Ryo away, impressed by Ryo's perfectly timed attacks. Seeing as he won't win with Flora as a handicap, Lucius puts Flora down, asking who Ryo truly is, especially since Lucius wouldn't forget a talented fighter like Ryo. When Ryo refuses to talk, Lucius prepares to slay Flora, but Ryo calls Lucius's bluff, knowing Lucius needs to keep Flora alive. Confirming Ryo's suspicions, Lucius deduces that Ryo and himself must have met when Ryo was a child, something Ryo doesn't deny, prompting Lucius to give Ryo an offer. Lucius says he'll let Flora go, and in exchange Ryo must reveal who he is, an offer Ryo can't refuse as Lucius orders Flora to stand in between them. Lucius knows he can still reach Flora with the distance, but first orders Ryo to reveal his identity. Keeping his end of the bargain, Ryo reminds Lucius that he once stayed with a mother and child in the Beltrum Kingdom, only to slay the mother, exciting Lucius as he's amazed that Ryo is still alive. Lucius reveals that he had intentionally left Ryo alive, hoping for the day they would meet again. But Ryo is just glad Lucius stayed the despicable person he imagined Lucius to be. Lucius states he takes pleasure from others' suffering, wondering if Ryo wants him to apologize, but Ryo says he could care less. Lucius says he loves seeing people emotional, pointing out how boring Ryo's pale look is. But Lucius does bring up the fact that he heard from Ryo's father that Ayam was once a princess from another kingdom. With Flora slowly putting the pieces together, Flora realizes Ryo and Haruto are the same people. But Lucius gets more excited seeing Ryo now reaching his boiling point. As Lucius gets serious himself, he suddenly spots Ryo blink past him, only to realize Ryo has severed one of his arms. Horrified, Lucius leaps back, soldering his wound only to wonder how he wasn't able to see Ryo move. As Ryo goes on the offense, Lucius begins to break down, shocked to sense such power exuding from Ryo's body. But seeing no option, Lucius tries to escape. Sadly, Ryo has already caught up, pinning Lucius to a tree with his foot only to attempt to impale him. But Lucius slips by. Igniting his blade, Ryo cuts down a massive tree nearby to scare Lucius further, only to tap the ground to conjure several earth spikes that attempt to impale Lucius. Tracking Lucius's exact position, Ryo fires off some spells, watching as Lucius rushes him. But having surpassed Lucius's speed, Ryo blows Lucius back. Continuing the onslaught, Ryo forces Lucius to erect a barrier, but Ryo's power blows past the barrier, knocking Lucius to the ground. With several broken bones and ruptured organs, Lucius knows he must reattach his arm soon, but Ryo suddenly teleports over to Lucius's severed arm, burning it in front of him. When Lucius asks if Ryo should be capturing him, Ryo coldly states he has no obligation to, rushing in for a slash only to knee Lucius onto the ground. Going in for the finishing blow, Ryo ignites his blade as he slips it into Lucius's stomach, but as a last-ditch resort, Lucius sends his dagger flying at Flora. Forced to save Flora, Lucius confirms Ryo did care about Flora all along, but Ryo locks back onto Lucius, preparing the finishing blow. Sadly, Rice has finally appeared, defending Lucius. Ryo orders that Rice leave Lucius with them, but sadly Rice needs Lucius, preparing to flee. As Rice begins channeling some magic, he barely hears Lucius reveal Rice's name, only to be alerted by Aishia to look above, suddenly engulfed by the fiery breath of a dragon. Check out one of our other videos on the screen or in the info card above. Subscribe, like, and comment.